One night, my life was turned upside down. I'm Rick Hammond, a Secret Service agent dedicated to securing locations for the president and high-ranking officials. Returning home early, I found my wife, Danielle, entangled with Donnie Simmons and a group of his friends. The betrayal cut deep, revealing a darker conspiracy. I secretly filmed their affair, capturing every sordid detail. At a high-profile gala, I played the footage, exposing their deceit. But the chaos deepened as I uncovered their plan to embezzle my company funds and frame me. Friends turned foes, and allies became pawns. My sorrow transformed into a cold, relentless pursuit of justice. This isn't just a story of infidelity, it's a masterful tale of calculated vengeance. Witness the fall of those who betrayed me, and my rise from the ashes. I turned off my Mustang and let out a big sigh. I really didn't like coming here. It's hard to believe I once thought this place was better than Disney World. Looking at the small old apartments, it's hard to imagine they were ever nice. What's even stranger is how quickly they fell apart in less than 3 years. The apartment where I parked is not great, but the one I'm going to is even worse. I can't park my car in front because there are many broken cars and a truck in the way. They're blocking the path and even parked on the dirt. Calling it a lawn seems wrong since there's no grass at all. I think to have a lawn, you need at least a few blades of grass. What's there now is just dirt, mud, weeds, and an old truck that looks out of place. When I lived here, I was proud of my lawn. I watered the plants every other day and cut the grass every weekend. My neighbors and I like to talk about how to keep our yards looking nice. We are always trying to use the best tools. Now, this place feels empty. The loud music coming from inside is the only sign that someone lives here. The paint on the house is peeling, and the wooden steps are bending, making it look even more lonely. The screen door swings in the wind. There's no screen or glass in it. The only thing keeping it up is a loose hinge at the top. The bottom corner of the door seems stuck in the rotting wood of the porch. It swings every time the wind blows and makes a loud noise because of that old hinge. It scrapes against the porch more and more with each gust of wind. I wonder what it will be like when I come back in 2 years. Will the wind finally break the hinge and let the door fall? Or will it just dig deeper into the porch until it can't move anymore? Sometimes I wonder why no one in the neighborhood comes to take the door away, both at night and during the day. They could easily bring it to the scrapyard. As I shut the door of my Mustang, the loud bang gets everyone's attention. I realize my car alarm won't stop any thieves around here if they want to steal it. But if my car is getting looks, I use that to my advantage. I let my long black coat open a bit so my gun is visible. I also make it clear that I'm checking my gun before I go into the place I'm visiting. I probably look like an undercover cop. I walk to the back of the car and lift the small trunk. I pull out a big stuffed animal. But this isn't just any bear or unicorn. It's a big stuffed skunk. This skunk is a joke between my daughter and me. Ever since I took her to see the movie Over the Hedge when she was 3, she has loved skunks. I know she will be excited about this one, too. I carefully walk onto the old porch, worried the weak boards might break. But they hold strong as I knock on the door and wait. After a little while, no one answers, so I turn the doorknob and open the door. What I see inside looks chaotic. Loud country music from a cheap stereo mixes with strange sounds. I see 3 men with 1 small woman, and they all look hot and sweaty. The woman's voice is the loudest. "Oh, keep going! More!" she shouts, not noticing anything else. In one corner, a man is smoking something. I don't pay much attention to him. My eyes focus on the woman on the couch. She is lying back with her legs up while a big guy is very close to her. She makes many sounds, and another man is nearby too. The third man is moving along with the music. In another room, 2 guys seem to be playing cards. I wonder what happened to the old stove we used to have when I lived here. One of the guys is dressed in a nice suit. He seems to be the only one paying attention to me. I drop the skunk and pull out my phone. Instead of getting the gun, I start taking pictures. I focus on the woman's face and some shots of the whole scene. Next, I switch to video and walk through the house while recording. I go to a door on the 2nd floor. I open it and film my 8-year-old daughter asleep. I close the door quietly and start packing some of her clothes into a small suitcase from her closet, trying to fit in as much as I can. Then my phone rings. "Hammond," I say when I pick it up. "It's Rick, my boss, Jeremy Clarkson, giving me a call. I have a job for you. Your plane to DC leaves in an hour." "I'm on my way," I reply before hanging up. I hurry back down the stairs, but everything looks the same in the room. I yank the plug from the wall and the music stops suddenly. "Damn it, Danielle!" I shout. "Rena is upstairs sleeping while you're throwing a party with these people." I wanted to take her away, but my boss called me. I had another job, but I promised I would be back soon. Then I heard a gun click and I froze. I should have known it was the man in the suit. "Who are you?" he asked. He and the man he was with looked very different from everyone else in the room. They were the only ones in nice clothes. They weren't drunk or high either, and they both had guns. This made me feel uneasy. "He's my husband," Danielle said. "You don't need to worry about him." Then the man in the suit spoke again. "Oh, wait, you should be quiet," he said. "Donnie, keep her quiet." Donnie must be Donnie Simmons, Danielle's new boyfriend. His dad, Big Al Simmons, owned a chain of stores that sold appliances in the Midwest. I knew that in a few years, big stores like Best Buy would start to take away his business. Online shops like Amazon would also affect him unless he found a way to change things. But for now, Big Al's appliance stores were still doing well. Donnie didn't really help with the stores. He thought he was a smart business guy, just waiting for his big chance. His dad gave him a fancy title in the company that made him seem more important than he actually was. Donnie might have thought he would run the stores his way when his dad was gone, but anyone who was wise could see that he was mistaken. By then, there might not be much left. Donnie was tall and very heavy, with big lips that looked odd on him. It seemed he was okay with sharing his girlfriend Danielle with his friends. "Hey, boss," said the man next to the one in the suit. "That guy's got a gun and something shiny next to it. I think it's a badge. Is he a cop?" The man pointed the gun at me but started to lower it. "Not really," I said, "but I do have a gun." I raised my hands and opened my coat so they could see my badge and ID. My gun and holster were enough to show I meant business. "Look at the holster and the gear," said the second guy. "He's a Fed." I nodded. "I'm not here for work," I said. "I came because my daughter visited yesterday, and she saw something in a toy store window. The store was closed last night, so I came back to get it today. I'm just here to take her away from this place." The man in the suit nodded. "I understand why any dad would want his child far from here." "So, is that why you took pictures of your wife?" he asked. I nodded. She had been making it hard for us to get a divorce for almost 3 years. Now, I finally had proof that could help me get the divorce and keep my daughter. "That's why you didn't take pictures of my friend and me," he continued. "We're only here because Mr. Simmons thinks this is fun. There are 5 or 6 men with one woman. No offense," he added. "None taken," I replied. "I'm sorry about the guns. We sometimes carry cash for our work. We both have permits for the guns, and I believe you." "I'm not here for you or your friend. I just want my daughter out of this terrible place." "We'll be leaving now," he said. "Good luck with your divorce." He and his friend walked out of the room and headed outside. I wondered where they had parked. I was sure they drove nice cars, but I didn't see any out front. "What are you doing here?" Richard shouted at Danielle. He looked at her with a mix of surprise and anger. It was hard to believe she was the same woman I knew 3 years ago when we split up. That time had really hurt me. 8 years before that, when we got married, I felt like the luckiest man alive. I could hardly believe that someone so beautiful was my wife. But now, seeing her with sagging skin, a round belly, and thin, wobbly legs made it hard to connect the old image of her with the loud, sweaty person yelling at me. When I first met her, she had just won the title of Miss Michigan. I thought she would become Miss America and shine in movies or TV. Every guy who saw her back then fell for her, and I was one of them. It seemed like she loved me just as much. I thought we had it all. "No one said you could come inside my house," Richard added. She screamed, "Donnie, call the police! No, just get him out!" As Donnie moved closer, the other guy stood up too. Donnie was bigger than me, and he thought I would be scared. But I wasn't afraid of him. Donnie wasn't as smart as I thought. Fighting another man while you are naked is just silly." Donnie lifted his arms like he wanted to hug me. I stepped on his foot hard and heard a crack. Then, I quickly hit him in the throat. I didn't want to hurt him too much, but he forgot about his foot pain as he tried to breathe. My next move was easy and didn't really need to be done. Donnie was out of it, and his friends quickly stepped back when they saw how I had taken him down. I didn't really need to kick him, but I did it anyway. I kicked Donnie hard, leaving him groaning on the floor. I'm not a bad person. I don't like to hurt others, but I am just a man. The loud, messy guy with Donnie used to be my girlfriend, and she is still my wife in the eyes of the law. That's why I acted the way I did. It's a strong feeling to see another guy with the person you love. It makes you want to fight back. That's why I kicked Donnie again, even though he was already on the ground. I stepped on Donnie's hand, then his chest, and then his other arm while I faced Danielle. Maybe that was too much. I wanted Danielle to see that her new boyfriend didn't matter to me. Donnie just lay there behind me, struggling to breathe and not able to say anything. His friends quickly got dressed and ran out, leaving Donnie behind. I turned to Danielle and said calmly, "First, I have every right to be here because I pay the bills for this place. Second, the court said I can visit my child as long as I pay my child support. You cannot stop me from coming here. I just want to see my child. I don't care who you are with or what you do. You can do what you want, but please don't hurt my daughter. I took pictures today, and I'll use them to try to get custody of her when I return. Maybe we can finally wrap up this divorce. You can go wherever you like." She looked at me with anger. "You're going to lose your job and end up in jail," she said, spitting the words out. "You broke into this place and hurt poor Donnie." I turned and snapped pictures of the last two guys trying to leave. "Stop right there," I shouted. They froze. "I have your pictures. I can find out who you are," I said firmly. Then I walked over to the first guy and took his wallet. The second guy just handed his wallet to me without a fight. I took pictures of their IDs and returned the wallets. "Are we going to jail?" the first guy asked, shaking a little. "I used to have a medical card for that weed. I have glaucoma," he added quickly. I told him, "I don't need you to talk in court, and I don't care about the weed. If you need to leave, just say what really happened. I was trying to talk to Danielle, and she called her big boyfriend to come get me. But you might not have to say anything because Danielle might have played a big game." The two men looked at me curiously. "What game, officer?" asked the second man. I was feeling a bit lightheaded, so I might have missed it. I said she turned a nice woman into a loud, messy troublemaker. Anyway, Danielle is clever. She's just talking to scare me. Even if I shouldn't have been there, I actually do. The door was open, so I turned the knob and walked inside. "Danielle can't win this. She told Donnie to throw me out. Danny came at me, and I had to watch out for the bigger guy. Plus, I'm a federal agent, so it would be Donnie and Danielle who get in trouble. She's not that dumb. Have a good day." I looked back at Danielle, who was really angry. Her face was bright red and her fists were tight. "Maybe if you let out some anger, you won't be so mad," I joked with Danielle. "That video won't help your case," she replied, reminding me of the laws here. "They'll just want to know why you let your daughter live like this and take more money from you. Donnie's dad wants to open some shops in other states. If you push this or show that video, I'll take Katrina and myself and move away with him. You won't see her much after that. I'll be gone for a while," I said. "I have work to do out of town. We can talk more later." "You know that's why I cheated on you," she said. "You were always away for work. I felt lonely after a time." "Save it for someone else," I replied, and I walked out. Danielle was standing there. Donnie was trying to get up. I looked at him, worried. He was coughing and holding his throat. He was making strange sounds. I sat down on the couch. Before, I wouldn't let Rick sit on the couch after a run. When we first moved here, I worked hard to make everything nice. I chose this furniture because I wanted it to look nice, and now it does. Just look at me. I'm only 2 years older than Rick at 30, but I feel like I look almost 40. Rick, on the other hand, has a young and handsome face. He looks younger than his 28 years. If you asked him why he looks so good, he'd probably say it's because he works out a lot to stay fit for his job. But I think there's more to it. The real problem is that Rick seems perfect. He has never made a mistake. I don't think of myself as a bad person. I just make mistakes like everyone else. I have made some mistakes in my life and in my marriage. The trouble is that Rick and his job put a lot of pressure on me. They don't see that Rick isn't a police officer, he isn't a field agent either. Rick works for the Secret Service. He doesn't protect the president, but he is very respected and could become one of those agents someday. Rick's job is to get places ready for when the president or a senator might visit soon. He makes sure those places are safe. He plans the best paths for them to take to stay out of trouble. Rick and his team look for spots where someone could attack from far away. It's a hard job, but they do it well. No American president has ever been hurt while traveling abroad, and most attacks have happened in the United States. That shows a lot about their work, and it shows a lot about Rick, too. Rick seems to know when something feels off. He puts all his focus on one task at a time. It's like he can only see what's right in front of him. That's how he caught my attention. But it's also why we had some tough times. Let me start over. My name is Danielle Meitner. Actually, I guess my name is Danielle Hammond, since I'm still legally married to Rick. I really don't like saying legally. I'm 30 years old now, but I wasn't always like this. In high school and college, I was a cheerleader and I looked great. Many guys wanted to date me, but I didn't choose any of them. I wanted to wait for someone special. I want to find a man who is successful. I don't want to be with just anyone. By successful, I mean a man who cares for his family and has good values. I don't need him to be rich, but he has to love me and our kids and help us have a good life. I thought this was a fair wish. Even though I was attractive, I could have married a wealthy older man who was always around after football games. But I don't think that would have been good for me, right? You might still look down on me, wouldn't you? Let me tell you more about my past. If you saw me 9 years ago, you would have met Miss Michigan, a beauty pageant winner who might become Miss America. You would see a nice 21-year-old girl who looked like she had everything together. But what you wouldn't know is that this pretty girl grew up in a trailer park with 5 other kids. My parents never married, and one day my mom got tired of everything and just left. I can see why we never had much. The only thing we had was each other, but we often didn't get along. My parents fought all the time. They argued about not having enough money, and when they did have some, they fought about how to spend it. Also, both my parents liked to look at other people. My dad would chase after anyone he saw, and my mom did the same. But my dad could hide what he was doing. My mom wasn't as secretive. I remember many of their fights starting with her saying, "So what if I was with another guy?" One day after one of their fights, my mom left. We were too young to understand what had happened. They didn't tell us everything at first. They fought because my dad found out my mom had been with someone else. Back then, I didn't really understand what that meant. I thought it just meant sharing a bed, so I didn't see why it was such a big deal. After the fight, my mom left the trailer in a hurry. People said they saw her get into a car with another man. She never came back. I can still remember my dad crying for days after she was gone. That's when everything got really tough because he stopped going to work. What had happened took all the strength out of him, and he was never the same. I thought he shouldn't have gotten so upset about her being with other people. We ended up losing our home. All the kids were split up and sent to live with different relatives. I didn't know that not all of us had the same fathers. My sister Claudia, who I always thought was so pretty and the one I cared about the most, wasn't taken in by the grandpa who took me in when I begged him to take Claudia too. He just shook his head. "She doesn't need much space, and I'll share my food with her." I cried. "She's my sister. She's my favorite sister." "Be quiet, girl," he said. "You can call her your sister if you want. But she isn't my granddaughter. I won't take that child home with me. My son was silly for putting up with your mother's behavior." Losing my family changed a lot of how I thought and felt as I grew up. I made a promise to myself when I got married. I would only be with my husband, and I would not raise my family in a small trailer for long. I never blamed my mom for anything. I thought all the bad things were my dad's fault. I believed that one day my mom would come back for us. I imagined her finding all of her kids who were spread out and bringing us back together. I thought my dad would find us too and forgive her. Then we would be a happy family again. This dream was like a shield for me. I held on to it as I got older, but when I turned 16, I learned the real story from my cousin during a visit. My grandfather didn't take me to see my dad because my dad had died the year before. He had passed away in a hospital where people go when they are very unwell, my cousin told me. She told me that my dad went to the hospital because he lost control when he found out my mom was gone. There was no hope that my parents would come back to us. My cousin shared more about what happened. He said it wasn't my dad's fault. It was my mom's. After a big fight, she got into a car with a man she didn't know. She did this to hurt my dad. But that man hurt her badly and left her on the side of the road. They never caught him. My cousin said this was God's way of punishing her. Now I understood why my dad cried and seemed so lost. Even though my mom made bad choices, my dad loved her so much that he couldn't imagine living without her. My grandfather often called my mom bad names. Later, I told him that both my mom and dad had cheated. He just shook his head. He said my dad only started seeing other women after my mom had done it many times first. He believed they were too young when they got together. They had no money, no skills, and no jobs. Even though they were never married, they just couldn't let go of each other. It felt like one of those sad stories in a play. At that moment, I decided I had to go to college. I told myself that any man I married had to love me like my dad loved my mom. He also needed to be smart. At first, everything was good. I was popular and looked nice, but I didn't go on many dates because I had high standards. In my second year of college, some friends introduced me to a guy I had never met before. When he saw me, there was something special in the air as our friends talked about us. But then, I saw disappointment in his eyes. He looked away from me and I began to feel worried. I found out that we were both from Michigan, and I feared he might see through the stories I had made about my past. I thought that once he knew about me, he might not want to talk to me anymore. He probably thought I was going to act crazy, like on a wild TV show. He looked perfect and shiny, like a fresh coin, and I was sure he didn't want anything to do with me. He even left the cafeteria and waited outside for my friends to take him back to his dorm. I just had to find out why he looked so sad, so I decided to follow him. "Your name is Richard, right?" I asked. "Yep," he said, staring at the ground. I saw that he was taller than me, but not too much. He was strong and moved in a way that seemed very manly, which surprised me a bit. I know this sounds silly, but when I looked into his eyes, I felt like I could see who he really was inside. He wanted a lot more than just a fling. He wanted all of me. He wanted my whole life. "Why don't you like me?" I asked. He looked surprised. "Who said I don't like you?" he answered. "You're a beauty queen. You're going to be in the Miss America pageant and on TV. I just didn't think you would want to spend time with someone like me." "Are you really a big football star?" I asked. He chuckled. "I guess so," he said. "But I haven't even started school here yet. I'm 18 and still finishing high school. I'll begin here in the fall. Right now, they're just giving me a tour and helping me adjust to everything. I could choose another school, too." "Why would you want to do that?" I wondered. "Well, I can play football at any school in the country," he explained. "I have many offers, but I don't want to be at another place and see you with other guys." "So how do you know it wouldn't be you with me?" I asked. "Being older than you might make a difference," he answered. That was all it took. From that day on, we were always together. Rick was unlike any other guy I had known. He always spoke honestly. He hardly ever swore and treated me like I was special. He was even more upset than I was about what happened at the Miss America pageant. Everyone expected me to win, except for a few of the girls I was up against. I felt good and looked good. My first big problem happened during the main introduction when all the contestants walked across the stage. We wore costumes that showed off interesting things about our home states. As I walked across the stage, moving my hips and getting ready to say, "My name is Danielle Meitner and I'm from Michigan," my high heels broke, and I fell down hard. I tried to make it look like I was just fixing my shoes to hide that I had a problem, but the camera had already focused on the next contestant. The only thing the crowd remembered was me falling down. I still got to move on to the next round because of my looks, but any chance of me appearing graceful was gone. That fall probably took away my chance to be Miss America, but I didn't give up. I thought I could do well in the talent contest, but once again, things went wrong. I played the violin, but someone had crept backstage and loosened the tuning pegs on my violin. Later, I found out that someone had glued the hairs on my bow together. This meant my violin couldn't make the right sound. When I played, it sounded awful, like a bunch of cats fighting. I have to admit, it made the crowd react strongly. Some people cried because the music was so bad. Others laughed at the funny look on my face while I played. After the contest, my coach took my shoes and my violin to show the contest organizer what had happened. He just looked at her and smiled. "Is this her first big contest?" he asked. We nodded, thinking he was being nice. All right, he said, still smiling. Let's call everyone back for a redo. We were shocked. Really? I asked. Of course not, he snapped. Listen, girl, like those rappers say, people do crazy things. Next time you're in one of these contests, watch your things. Every girl wants to win really badly. Playing with your nice shoes or your violin doesn't matter much. The hardest thing for me is keeping some of the girls from trying too hard to win. Now, if you don't mind, I was still Rick's beauty queen, and that night he asked me to marry him. He said he was sorry I lost, but also happy because he didn't want me traveling far away while we were apart. That night was when we first got close, and we never looked back after that. About 4 months later, everything changed when I found out I was going to have a baby. Rick was very happy, so we got married right away. We couldn't wait 2 more years for him to finish school. But as I started to show, the chances to speak as a former beauty queen began to disappear. Rick's family wanted to help us, but Rick thought we should figure things out on our own. He left school and gave up his dream of playing professional football for our baby and me. He chose to join the military to earn some money and go to college. After he finished his service, while he was taking tests for the Army, he got a call from a different part of the government. He made a deal to work for the Secret Service. They paid for the rest of his college classes and gave him money while he trained. We moved into a nice little apartment and thought we were starting a great future. The first few years were really nice, but as time went on, Rick had to work more, sometimes going to other states and even other countries. This made me feel upset. It seemed like Rick was making progress in his job and seeing new places while I felt stuck at home doing nothing. I knew some of it was my fault. Even after Katrina was old enough for daycare, I didn't try to get back in shape. I had gained weight during my pregnancy and added more after having 2 kids. Rick was happy with our life. He loved me a lot and I felt truly loved. But he was away so often. Rick is the best dad I know. We talked about buying a house and having another baby. It was a happy time until I messed things up. I guess I was more like my mother than I thought. I got caught up with a nice guy from our neighborhood. Rick had been away for a week, and I felt very lonely. When the guy offered to mow our lawn, I invited him in for coffee. I gave him coffee and some cake. Before he left, I made a big mistake. I wondered what being with another man would feel like. I found out the hard way. It felt similar to being with Rick, but it didn't mean anything to me. I promised I wouldn't do it again, but I did, and then I did it again. Eventually, Rick found out. He came home early one day. He was very angry and hurt the guy badly. In that moment, I realized what Rick does for a living. He put the man in the hospital but didn't get hurt himself. Rick called the police, and they took the man to the hospital. He had to go through surgeries and a long time to heal just because I was trying to deal with my loneliness. I knew I had made a mistake, but I didn't think it was that bad. The man was not a threat to my marriage. I didn't love him. I was just spending time with him. For me, it was as simple as playing cards, but Rick saw it very differently. We had a huge argument while I tried to explain myself. So I was with him. So what? I told Rick that he wasn't around to be with me. He didn't lose anything, right? Part of me was relieved to be found out because it made me say what I really wanted. I wanted Rick to stop traveling and just take a job at home. I thought he earned enough money and I would be happier if he was always home. I thought I knew my husband well, but I forgot how truthful he was. Rick had never lied to me, even when it was hard to tell the truth. So I should have realized that he wouldn't easily accept lies from anyone else. "Danielle," he said, and I didn't understand why he was crying. If it was so important to him, I thought he could take it right away. "You got it wrong. I didn't lose anything. I lost everything." With that, he walked away and started packing in our room. "You're a jerk!" I shouted. I was glad my daughter was still at daycare. "You come back after being gone for a week. You hit a guy because he tried to make me feel better when you were not around. Then we have a big fight and you leave again for work. When you come back, another man might be here." I didn't really mean it. I was just upset. "You're wrong again, Danielle," he said calmly. His calmness bothered me more. But that was just how he was. A quarterback has to stay cool and think straight while big, fast guys try to tackle him. Rick was just being himself. "I'm not wrong," I yelled. "I can spend my time with anyone I want. I say it's yours, but if you're not here, someone else might take it." "You're right about that," he said. "But you were wrong about other things. First, I want to be clear. I'm not leaving for work. I'm just leaving. I can't stay with someone who lies. Second, when I come back, you thought there would be another man here. You're wrong. I won't be coming back. I'll call you to set up a time for me to pick Raina up. From now on, I think we should talk through lawyers. Goodbye, Danielle. And congratulations. You wanted to hurt me, and you did. You broke my heart. I loved you a lot. We had a good life together. But I guess you wanted something else. I was shocked by what he said. He was dealing with everything all wrong. I need you to know one thing. He kept talking. My life away from you is not what you think. You feel bored here and want to do more things. I work hard to keep you safe because I want that. I want you to feel comfortable and secure. People in other countries don't always like us, even when we try to help them. In many places we visit, people spit at us, shout, or throw things our way. Sometimes, I have to hurt people to keep my team or those we are helping safe. I do all this to make sure we can have a better life. If I had just stuck to playing football, I would be safer and richer now. Then he was gone. I couldn't believe I had pushed my husband away over a not-so-great moment with a man who just wanted to have some fun, like I did. He could never have those kinds of moments with his wife. I realized a long time ago that I was no better than someone who sold themselves for money. The only difference was that he would have had to pay someone for that. At that moment, I decided to do everything I could to win Rick back and fix things. But nothing I tried worked. He wouldn't talk to me unless it was about our daughter, Katrina. Rick asked for a divorce and wanted shared care of her. That was all he wanted. He agreed to split everything equally and even offered to help me for 5 years. Even though he could have just asked for 2 things, I tried to stop the divorce because I wanted him back so much. Every time I reached out and he didn't reply, I felt hurt and tried to make him feel bad too. I knew how to do this easily. When I asked him to meet or have dinner at home and he said no, I would go out with someone nearby who knew him. I did this 4 or 5 times in the first 6 months after our divorce. I guess I didn't see the big picture. I didn't understand that every time I did this, it only made things worse. Rick seemed to care less and less as time went by. Soon, he didn't care at all. By the end of the first year of our divorce, my lawyer encouraged Rick to go to counseling, but he could only go when he was in town. The counseling lasted over 6 months. Then, more fights about money and work trips began. The second year of our divorce was full of more drama. Everything changed for me. One day, Katrina came home full of excitement after visiting her dad. She told me about her new mom. Rick, her dad, had taken a woman he was dating to the zoo, and I felt heartbroken. It took a long time before I finally saw her. She was everything I felt I wasn't. She spoke with a fancy English voice that made her sound important. She had won beauty contests in college and still looked beautiful. While I had short, dark hair, she had long, wavy blonde hair and bright blue eyes. When she stepped out of Rick's car, I didn't want to meet her anymore. I just wanted to watch her. I felt like screaming and then hiding away. More than anything, I wanted to be like her. She was so beautiful that it made my heart hurt. I thought if I were her, Rick would love me again. She stood by the car while Rick went inside to get Katrina, and I knew he would be gone for good soon. To try to keep Rick, I made my wishes in the divorce even stronger. At the same time, I began dating Donnie. I don't love Donnie, but I really need him. Donnie comes from a rich family. If Rick manages to divorce me, I will need Donnie. Every time Rick picked up our daughter, Katrina, I always talked about Donnie. It seemed like Rick didn't even notice. I finally saw how silly I was when I told Rick that we should all go out together. He could bring his English friend, and Donnie and I could come along. That's when I realized just how foolish I was. "Are you happy with Donnie?" he asked. "Oh, yes," I said, wanting to see his reaction. "He makes me feel more loved than any man I have known," I added. "It's the best I've ever felt." He seemed to wince, but then he smiled. "I'm glad you're happy," he replied. "I have always wanted you to be happy during all this. Maybe we can work out the divorce so you can marry him." "Are you happy with Anne?" I asked. I was surprised by what he said. He really seemed to care about my happiness. "Why would I be happy with Anne?" he replied, looking confused. "We're not together. She's just a co-worker of mine. I was her training officer. Sometimes I would take her to the zoo to be nice. I would never start a new relationship while I'm still married to you, Danielle. I really thought you knew me better." He looked at me like he was shocked. "Did you really think I would act like that?" he asked as he walked away with Katrina. I ran to my room and cried again. I realized that all my plans to hurt him only ended up hurting me. In the end, I never wanted to hurt him at all. I just wanted him back. "Water," Donnie mumbled, pulling me from my thoughts. I looked down at his body lying on the floor. I got him a cup of water. He took a sip and winced as it went down. He tried to speak and said, "I need a doctor. My back hurts a lot. I can't walk. My foot hurts too." I couldn't help but laugh. "What's so funny?" he asked, annoyed. "Before we got married, Rick used to play football. I think he played with you. Get it? Foot and ball, football." "I should have taught him a lesson," Donnie complained. "Next time I see him—" "Donnie, please," I said. "Just stop. You tried to fight him and he was there with you." "You're bigger and stronger," I reminded him. "You jumped at him first and you had 3 friends with you. He could have just shot you and gotten away with it, but instead he hurt a federal agent. If the agent had shot him, he would have gone to jail after he healed from his surgery. But don't worry about it," I added. "You stood up for your partner and I'm here for you. If it helps at all, I think the agent hurt his shoes when he kicked you." Ricky arrived at the federal building in the city. He parked my Mustang in the underground garage. Then I took one of our shuttles to the airport. I showed my badge and got on the plane with 20 minutes to spare. The flight to Washington, D.C. was quiet. I slept through most of it. I had no idea where I would be sent or how long I would be away. The good thing about my divorce was that I could focus completely on my job. I was free to take any work anywhere in the world. When I got off the plane, my boss, Jeremy Clarkson, and another worker, James May, were there to meet me. Jeremy was smiling as I walked over. This could mean he had either good news or some not-so-great news he wanted me to handle. "Guess where you're going?" he asked once we got into the car. "Iraq?" I guessed, but got it wrong. "Wrong place," he said. "Canada." I tried again. "Central Park, Manhattan?" He smiled and said, "Oh man, that's not right either. Isn't that where the sewers from Russia, Poland, and Slovakia dump out?" He nodded. "But at least you'll be there doing your dream job," he said cheerfully. "Am I going to protect the president?" I asked, excited. "Not exactly," he answered, "but it's close." Soon we arrived at the White House. Inside, we went to a briefing room where 10 other agents were waiting for their assignments. There were 8 men and 2 women in the room. Jeremy walked up to the front just as the First Lady walked in. She smiled at me and I stood up. "Hello, Mrs. Cameron," I said politely. "Come on, Rick," she said with a friendly southern drawl. "You don't have to be so formal. There aren't any reporters here, but I appreciate it." She gave my shoulder a gentle pat and went over to talk to Jeremy. He nodded and shuffled some papers before he started to speak. "Let's start the meeting," he said. He pointed at a screen behind him, and a map showed up. "This is the country of Park Manhattan," he explained. He talked about the area, its 3 big cities, and the borders it shares with some Eastern European countries. "You will be in Park Manhattan for 3 days," he added. "Your job is to protect the president," an older agent shouted with excitement. "No," Jeremy replied firmly. Then another agent yelled, "What about the Secretary of State?" "Not that one either," Jeremy replied. "The First Lady?" one of the female agents guessed. "Not exactly," Jeremy said. "So, who is it?" an agent asked, sounding annoyed. I could tell that everyone in the room felt let down. As I looked around, I saw that the agents' moods had changed since Jeremy started talking. Most of the agents were very skilled. They could do their jobs well, but we were all a little disappointed. The room had agents of different ages and levels of experience. Some were just starting their careers. Some of us, like me, had never done protection work before. Others had experience in keeping important people safe. Some thought this job was a big chance, while others felt it was a step down. "You'll be assigned to protect Millicent Cameron," Jeremy said softly. "Oh no, not Millie," one agent shouted. Jeremy's mood changed right away. He looked sharply at the agent who spoke. "Mr. Carlisle, you are no longer on this assignment," he said firmly. "Actually, you are suspended." Carlisle picked up his briefcase and stood up, grumbling as he walked out. He didn't look happy at all. "Is there anyone else here who doesn't want this job?" Jeremy asked. "Does anyone have something to say before we keep going?" No one answered, so I raised my hand. Jeremy seemed surprised. "Yes, Mr. Hammond," he said, speaking clearly. "I'm honored to protect Miss Cameron," I replied. "But this job was meant for 10 agents. I'm worried about her safety. Will Agent Carlisle be replaced?" Jeremy smiled and nodded. The First Lady smiled too. "My assistant agent May is already here," she said. "He will join you as the lead agent. Now let's go over the details of the assignment." For the next half hour, Jeremy talked about Pacman Stand and its culture. He explained the main religion, which was a very strict form of fundamentalist Christianity. Their beliefs were not too different from those of early Mormons or Jim Jones. They believed a man could have many wives if he could take good care of them. In many places, men held all the power. Women could not do certain things on their own. Our female agents always had to go out with a male escort. A woman without a man could be taken by another man, even if she was from a different country. If she was not married, her family had to find a way to bring her back home. If she was married, her husband had to get her back and make sure she faced the consequences. A married woman who was taken had to show proof of her marriage. If she couldn't, the man who took her could keep her for himself. Many women who were taken often found themselves abandoned by their husbands. No one wanted a woman who had been harmed. Sadly, a lot of these women ended up on the streets and had to survive on their own. In a world where women were not valued, one agent asked, "Why are we going there?" It sounds like it belongs to the past. Like many places in that area, including the U.S., Pacman has a hard relationship with its neighbors. Unlike some other nearby places, Pacman Austin is closer to North Korea and China than to Russia. They are the only ones who can give us a special kind of portable power we need, Jeremy explained. "I've heard of those," said another agent. "They call them power pellets, right?" "Yes," Jeremy replied. "To make our relationship better, we should have visits with Pacman. By the way, Millicent Cameron's college roommate was a princess from there. She invited Miss Cameron to visit for 3 days during one of their festivals. We had a few hours to get ready and were told to return to the White House to go to the airport. As I was leaving, the head of White House security stopped me. He took me toward the Oval Office, and I felt nervous. I thought the room would be empty because the president usually only used it for big meetings and press conferences. He preferred smaller rooms for daily work. The agents often called it the bad office because if you were sent there, it meant you made a mistake. Those who had issues during the Obama years lost their jobs in that room. I felt nervous walking there as we arrived. Agent Carlisle came out looking upset. "What happened to free speech?" he said loudly. A few minutes later, the director of the Secret Service came out and held the door for me. He smiled and nodded. I guessed he had spoken to Carlisle before me. That was how things were in Washington. People didn't get fired anymore. They didn't say you were laid off or let go. Now, they were cold when they told you to leave, but they still had annoying smiles. They would smile and then say things like, they knew you had skills that were not being used in your job. They didn't want you to waste your talent and not do your best. Sadly, they had no spot for you in their team. Instead of holding you back, they chose to let you go so you could find a better way to use your skills. They smiled at you while doing it, acting like they were giving you a great chance. But everyone knew that in Washington, D.C., it was all about who you know. If you got let go from one spot, it was hard to find a new job. I was thinking about whether to work in private security or use my savings to return to law school. Then I noticed someone in the office with me. I was standing in front of Alan Cameron, the President of the United States. He said, "Rick, I watched the meeting. You really saved the day. You showed the attitude and skills we expect from the Secret Service. You turned things around when they could have gone wrong. You're going places, son." Then he asked me for a favor. He said, "I know this isn't a dangerous job, and you should be doing something more important. I promise you will soon. This time I need you to watch over my daughter. I know she can be a little wild and unpredictable. When she wants something, she goes after it. But her mother was the same way when we were young, and she turned out fine. So, Rick, please keep my daughter safe." "Yes, sir," I answered. He reached over just like his wife did earlier and gave my shoulder a gentle pat as we got on the plane. I looked forward to some quiet time. I felt safe since Millicent was with her assistant and 2 female agents who would stay close to her. Some agents I knew asked me to play cards, but I said no. I just wanted some time to think about what had happened and how to deal with my divorce. I knew a little about Danielle's childhood and her family. We talked a lot about the marriage she wanted, and she always said that being honest was very important. I started to wonder what happened to the woman I used to know. She was different now, and I didn't want to stay with her anymore. I took out my notebook. It wasn't really a diary. It was more of a place for my thoughts and poems that helped me make sense of things. At the end of each year, or whenever I felt stressed, I would read my notes and think about my feelings and what was happening at that time. Some of the poems were nice. At least I thought so. But at that moment, I couldn't think of anything to write. No poems or even words came to my mind. I felt lost, like I was in a thick jungle where danger was everywhere. I had to be careful about where I went because one wrong step could lead to trouble. Even with danger all around me, I felt very alone. It seemed like the only person I truly cared about was my 8-year-old daughter. I worried that if I wasn't careful, I could lose her too. I put my notebook back in my pocket and tried to sleep. I didn't know how much rest I would get in the next few days, so getting some sleep now seemed smart. Before I closed my eyes, I looked around the plane and saw Millicent. She was chatting happily with the other women. She seemed totally carefree. This made me feel like I was really doing my job. Soon, I fell asleep. As the plane flew to our destination, I felt light and happy. My old friend Polly had invited me at just the right moment. The guy I was dating, Derek Christian, was starting to push me, and I wasn't ready for that. He reminded me of the other men I had dated before. They were all good-looking and came from rich families. When we were together, we looked nice and ended up in magazines. We went to all the fancy parties and events. Everything felt too perfect. Sometimes, I felt more like a showpiece than a real woman. I used to surprise people by wearing skirts that were thought to be too short or too tight for a girl from a rich family, especially as the daughter of a president. I also supported causes that my father did not agree with. These choices got more attention in the news than my clothes ever did. I was aware of what people said about me. I knew the names they called me. They called me Millie, the model, and even the odd one in the first family. This did not upset me much. The funny part was that even though they saw me as a wild party girl, I had only been with 2 men by the time I was 26. A lot of what the press wrote came from their own ideas about me. If I went to a party and there were rumors about drugs, people would think I was part of it too. The truth is, I had never tried drugs at all. There was one time I went camping in college, but that was it. Some news articles said that some campers, who were college students over 18, did things that people thought were not right. Because of this, many people assumed I did the same things. I went on a lot of dates because many guys asked me out. A big reason for this was my looks. I know people notice how I look. If I wasn't the daughter of the president, and before that, a senator's daughter, I might have even been a model. Not that I wanted to be one, but it was a chance. So many guys wanted to date me. About half were interested in my looks. The other half wanted to date me because of my family. Some had political dreams, while others thought being with me would make them look better. I had never been on a date where a guy saw me just as a person. I wasn't a good prize to win. Many guys left when they realized I liked to think and talk, not just look nice. I could stand up for myself if someone treated me badly. One of my problems is that the men I date often don't feel like real men. Most of the time, they behave more like boys or playthings. It was fun at first, but I was starting to grow out of that. My assistant Liz pointed something out while I was looking around the cabin. I noticed one of the agents who was there to keep me safe. His name was Richard, I think that's it, and he looked surprisingly good for a security agent. I usually thought security agents would blend in and not stand out at all, but this guy was different. He was kind of good-looking and around my age, maybe a little older. However, he didn't act like many guys my age who often seemed full of themselves. He had a certain charm that caught my attention. My parents had told me that if anything odd or risky happened, I should go to Rick for help. As the plane flew smoothly in the sky, I couldn't help but wonder what made him special. He wasn't the biggest or oldest agent, and he didn't look very scary either. I wondered why he was different from the rest. "I thought you were close with your mom," Liz said, teasing me. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I saw you looking at Rick Hammond," she replied with a smile. "He's not bad looking for a guy, but people say he's like your mom's little dog," one of the other agents joked. The 2 women laughed, and I looked at Liz in shock. Liz and I have been friends since high school, and she always understood what I was thinking. "No, you're wrong," she said. "Your mom taught us both about respect and doing what's right. She's a true lady and loves your dad a lot. That kind of love is hard to find in Washington." She added, "What I really meant is that Rick really cares about your mom. He treats her like a queen, not just the first lady." This made the two agents laugh again. "Is that really true?" I asked. The women looked at each other and one gave a small nod. "If your mom told him to jump, he would jump and stay up until she told him to come down," she said. "I think you're mistaken." The other agent joined in. "Rick is just very polite. It's not just about your mom, it's about your whole family." She turned to her friend. "Do you remember what he said at the meeting? He mentioned my mom there." I asked, "What did he say?" She answered, "No, he talked about you." I suddenly felt a bit shy, wanting to know what he said. "One of the other agents accidentally called you Millie the model. I heard many agents were nervous or unhappy about this job. Why is that?" I asked. "Well, can we keep this private?" she asked, looking at me. "I promise," I replied. "Okay. You go to a lot of parties, and while they look safe, they can really cause problems for some people. Things that might not seem important can change lives, ma'am. Remember that time you went to a party in New York and slipped away to another party with your boyfriend?" "Yeah," I said with a smile. "That was fun for you," she replied. "But the 4 agents watching you lost their jobs because they couldn't keep up. 2 of them had families. Your fun led to their losing their jobs. I was surprised. I didn't know that. Yes, many of us were worried about our duty to protect you. It felt unfair. If nothing happens, it's just another day at work. Watching you enjoy yourself during what should have been a short visit doesn't help us do well at our jobs or get promoted. If you leave us or something bad happens to you, it could affect us. We might lose our jobs or get a bad note on our records. That could make it hard for us to get better positions later." I found it tough to look at her, but they had made a strong team. Some of us felt that since we had good records, we should be given bigger jobs, like working with the top people. I asked, "Do you mean you want to work with car companies?" She replied, "No. The top 3 are the president, the vice president, or the first lady." After Agent Carlisle was let go for saying what many people thought, Rick raised his hand. He started by saying he was happy, but another agent interrupted. He said Rick didn't say happy. He said he was honored to be assigned to Miss Cameron. "Oh, you're right," the first agent agreed. He smiled and asked who would take Carlisle's place since the job needed 10 people. I glanced at the man sleeping nearby. In my life, no one ever said being with me was anything but a bother. Unless they were trying to make my parents happy or win my heart. Maybe that's why my parents liked him. They thought he was the kind of man who would keep me safe. "Gregor, they will arrive in just a few hours," he snapped. "Everything must be ready and it must be perfect. Oil those door hinges so they don't squeak or replace them." "Yes, my fingerprints," said the worker. "But this room might not even be used." "What are you saying, fool?" Gregor shouted angrily. He did not like the man at all and believed people in Manistee should show more respect to their future king. The court family had run the Pacman Stand for hundreds of years. With his father getting older, it was only a matter of time before Gregor became king. The man said, "Your sister has invited her to stay in a room close to hers. After all, she is her guest." "They did not think about your plan, my prince." Gregor's face turned red with anger, and he stormed off. Once he was alone, he grabbed his phone and called someone. "There's a change of plans," he said. "We have to do this the hard way. We will go back to the first plan." A voice on the other end replied, "No, you fool. This was Plan B. The other one was Plan A. When we chose this one, it became Plan A. Now the real Plan A is Plan B. Since the first plan, that became Plan B, isn't possible. The second plan goes back to being Plan A. Just do it." Gregor felt furious with his sister. Sonia always made things hard for him. She wanted to change the country and improve how women were treated. Gregor felt angry because his sister didn't even realize it was him who invited the American group to come visit. He had tricked her into asking them to join the spring festival that was coming up. Gregor wanted his sister to be part of the festival instead of staying in England to work on her studies. He thought Sonia's ideas about women were silly. She didn't understand the women from Park Manor because she didn't know any of them personally. She had been educated in different countries since she was 12 years old. Now, she thought more like a Western woman than one from her own country. Her friends didn't even call her Sonia. They called her Polly. Lucky for her, Gregor was the older brother. He did everything he could to keep her from spending too much time at home. He didn't want her to build support for her ideas, which he thought were pointless. Back in Park Manor, Stan remembered a time in their country when a queen ruled until she got married. Gregor had many important friends in strong countries and powerful people who relied on him to take care of the country. His father sometimes agreed with Sonia that it was time to make some changes. Gregor didn't want that, but he might have to make some tough choices. He walked to the window and looked down at Sonia's house. She had built a nice little home right next to the big palace. When she came back, that was where she lived. She made the choices. He should have known Sonia would let her guests stay with her. After all, they had shared a room in college. That was a mistake he shouldn't have made. He wrote down what he needed to do. He could still reach his goals, but it would be harder now. Millicent. As soon as the plane landed, I jumped up and rushed to the door. But that didn't last long. I was almost outside when Rick got in my way. He acted like he tripped, pretending to be clumsy. But I knew he just didn't want me to be the first one to the door. When the door opened, he nodded, and 2 agents got off the plane. They walked to the waiting limo. Rick watched from the plane window. The agents looked closely at Polly and her friend and nodded back to him. He then said sorry again for being in my way. I smiled, realizing he was worried about my safety. The funny thing was, he never looked me in the eye. He kept saying, "Ma'am," and "Miss Cameron." I wasn't used to that. My protection team usually called me Miss Cameron to show respect, but being called ma'am felt different. The agent in charge, Mr. May, seemed a bit annoyed that Rick was taking charge. I nodded at him and he smiled back, but I could tell he was still upset. "It's not like there's any danger," he told Rick, thinking I couldn't hear them. "We are just here for a nice visit. There are no big problems. Relax. We don't want you to worry too much and create problems." When I got in the limo, Polly and I started talking like we had just seen each other yesterday, despite it being a few years. We all called her Polly, short for her last name used in court. She seemed just like any other college girl, which made it hard to believe she was a princess. Her long, dark hair and light skin looked very different from my blonde hair and tan skin. We chatted about everything until the limo reached her home. There I met her father, the king, and her brother. They were all very kind. Her brother did seem a bit grumpy, but I thought that just meant he was shy. He suggested that my team and I move into rooms in the palace, but I politely said no. What Polly set up for us was good enough. I thought her brother was being nice as we spoke, and Mr. May introduced our team to the palace staff. I noticed that Rick and another agent were not there. I had no idea when he had left or how long he had been gone. When he returned, he gave me a small nod. I saw that he had checked the bungalow to make sure everything was fine, and he thought it was safe for me. May looked angry again. I remembered that my parents always had a team check the places they visited before they arrived. Mr. May and Rick didn't seem to agree on how much safety I needed. I believed Polly would keep me safe, but it felt nice that someone cared enough to worry about me. The rest of the day passed in a regular way. We spent a lot of time at Polly's bungalow, thinking about our college days and what we were doing now. I learned that we were not Polly's only guests. There were also a couple of women from England and one from Japan. Polly was making friends from around the world. One moment didn't go well. Mr. May was talking to Rick. "You need to relax, Hammond. This is not serious. The president isn't here. I think you're stressed. And for goodness sake, go shave." "This isn't Miami Vice," said May. Polly, Liz, the 2 women with me, and I were walking by when he said this. Sometimes I forget that I need to behave a certain way. My mother always tells me to act properly. One day I stopped and tapped Mr. May on the shoulder. When he turned around, looking surprised, I said, "Leave him alone." "He's okay, and I really like how he looks." Mr. May's eyes got bigger. He nodded fast and walked away. Rick just looked down and stood still. I wanted him to look me in the eye, but before I could say anything more, I heard some people behind me gasp and laugh as we walked away. One of the English girls stayed behind to watch Rick walk in the other direction. "I've never seen that before," Liz said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "You acted like a mother bear protecting her cub. That's not the Millie we know. What's happening?" Do you like him? She asked. Of course not, I replied quickly. You know I have a boyfriend, Liz. Yes, she said, but he's just a boy. You two are definitely friends. It has been 3 months and you haven't even kissed him yet. So you and Rick are just friends? Asked another girl from England. He's like her bodyguard, Polly replied. That's good to know, said the English girl with a smile. I think I need a nap. All this excitement is too much for me. Polly, can you find someone to go with me into town later? As she walked back to our room, her friend shook her head. She's still acting crazy, isn't she? Said Polly. Her friend nodded, and for some reason I felt angry. I stayed upset for the rest of the morning. I think Polly noticed. Liz kept looking at me and shaking her head. The 2 female Secret Service agents didn't talk much, but I could see their smiles. The 2 English women really bothered me. The wild one was named Carmela. I was also annoyed with her friend Beth because she reminded me too much of Carmela. Polly told me that we might go into town after all. Carmela had already left, and the other women wanted to wear local clothes. Some women here dressed like women everywhere else these days, but for the festival, wearing traditional outfits was normal. I sent one of the female agents to find Mr. May. He came over soon after. As he got closer, he looked calmer. I knew he was still upset, but I didn't mind. Mr. May, you are in charge of keeping me safe, right? I asked. He nodded. Well, I'm going into town, I started. No, you can't, he interrupted. We haven't checked the city yet. Who knows what could happen? I said firmly. I am going. His face turned red and he clenched his fists, but he stayed calm. I'll gather a team right away, he said. Will Agent Hammond be part of it? I asked. No, he replied. Agent Hammond has to watch you at night. I want him on the team, I insisted. But he's sleeping, he stammered. Make it work, I said as I walked toward the bungalow. I knew I was acting like the spoiled princess everyone thought I was, and that upset me because that's not who I really am. Everything bothered me that morning, but what really got to me was the thought of Carmela being alone with Rick. Why did May put him on night duty when everyone else was sleeping? I worried that he might not be alone. There was no way I was going to leave him here with Carmela. I began to get ready to leave. About 20 minutes later, Mr. May and 3 men came into the bungalow and stood in front of me. I looked at him and tilted my head. Before I could say anything, he spoke first. He said he was checking the limo, looking at the engine and everything under the car. I smiled and he let out a sigh. Just as we were about to leave, Carmela walked in with confidence. I'm so glad I found you, she said. I thought you were already in town, Liz replied. I forgot to grab something, Carmela said with a smile. She hopped into the limo and somehow ended up sitting right next to Rick. On the way to town, Carmela was cheerful and fun. I didn't like her being so charming, especially since it wasn't meant for me. Rick kept watching for any trouble ahead. It seemed Carmela wasn't used to being ignored, so she started talking to him. What are you doing? She asked. My job, ma'am, he replied. Oh, you're making sure we're safe, she smiled. That's exciting. What would you do if there were more than one attacker? I'd protect Miss Cameron and get her to safety, he answered. What if both of us were in danger? She asked again. I'd still protect Miss Cameron and help her get away from danger, he said firmly. What about me? She leaned in closer. What if I was in danger and she was safe? If there's any danger, he replied seriously, my first job would be to protect Miss Cameron. You could still be in danger too. But my job is to keep her safe, he insisted. Would you hurt someone to protect her? She wondered. He nodded. Would you risk your life for her? She asked without hesitating. Of course, he said without any doubt. Here's a tough question, she said, leaning in again. What if I, her friend, attacked her? It's not serious, just one of those girl fights that people like to watch. I'd stop you before you got close, he replied. But before he could say more, Liz and Polly started laughing so loudly that he lost his chance to finish. You really care about your job, Carmela laughed. The ride into town felt a bit strange. It felt like a weird little group. Carmela tried her best to be close to Rick. I felt more and more upset watching how obvious she was being, but I stayed calm. Meanwhile, Rick was focused on keeping me safe more than anyone else on the team. It also made me mad that he never looked at me. He talked to her directly, meeting her eyes when she leaned in close. He looked at her, but if I stood in front of him, he would turn his eyes away. It felt like everything around him was more interesting than me. Carmela seemed to really enjoy the game. On the way back, she wanted to show off a little. "Did you see the guy on the roof in the marketplace?" she asked. "Are you talking about the one with the fishing rod or the one hanging out?" he replied. "Laundry?" he said. "What were they wearing?" she asked again. "The fishing rod guy wore jeans and a checkered shirt. The laundry guy wore a worn robe," he answered. "My goodness, you notice everything, don't you?" she said with a smile. "I have to see everything, or it could be a problem," he began to explain. "What color are my eyes?" she asked suddenly. "Hazel with a little blue on the edges," he said, not missing a beat. "What about my bra?" she asked. "Black," he replied. This made Carmela laugh. "I'm glad you noticed," she teased. "So looking at my underwear isn't part of your job, like protecting Miss Cameron? You just did that yourself. If you want to see more of my things, you can just—" "Carmela," Beth warned. "Sometimes you go too far, and sometimes I just go far enough," Carmela said playfully, tapping Rick on the hand. "The ball is in your court," she added with a smile. "Don't worry about your job. She has a boyfriend. So, when you're not paying attention to her, how does that work? Do you get a break, or are you always on the clock?" Before Rick could answer, the limousine stopped, and we were back at the bungalow. I turned to see how he would react, but he was already outside, checking things. I looked at Carmela, who was still smiling and not looking at me. Polly was walking toward the bungalow with Beth right behind her. "I know that look," Liz said. "You did say you weren't interested, right?" I said quietly. "I can't stand that girl. Looks a bit like you," she replied. "I'm not like that," I shot back. "Well, maybe she's just honest about her feelings. Some guys like that kind of openness. It can be flattering in a way. But really, you and Carmela are quite alike when you know what you want. You go after it and usually get it," Liz said with a smile. "Then why do I feel like I'm losing?" I asked. "Probably because you're just sitting back and watching instead of joining in," Liz said. "This is new for you. You normally just show up, look nice, and let guys come to you. You might not be good at going after what you want," she said. "Maybe I need to make him come after me," I said with a grin. "That's not going to work," one of the female agents said. "Not now," said the other one. "Carmela probably understands that. That's why she's being so direct, and she has an advantage over you," the first agent added. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Rick is a really good agent." She explained that he takes his job very seriously. He already has a bad view of women. But first, he thinks of you as work before seeing you as a woman. You are just part of his job. So it's strange because he doesn't seem interested. But before he thinks about protecting you, there's something else. The other woman said that Carmela just needs to get past one little thing to get his attention. You, on the other hand, have to climb a big wall just to get to that little thing. But don't worry. Carmela usually stays with guys for just a few weeks before she finds someone new. The first agent asked how I knew this. I looked at both agents, and Liz acted like I was a little odd. "You should read the State Department reports," Liz told me. "Carmela Bingham is the niece of the British Prime Minister. She's kind of like a British version of you. She has had a lot of boyfriends all over the world. Creative people, rock stars, athletes. She has dated them all. A U.S. Secret Service agent would be something different for her." "Not him," I said sharply. The two agents smiled at each other. "When did he become yours?" Liz asked. "I don't know," I replied, "and I think he doesn't know it yet either. Maybe it happened on the plane while he was sleeping. Every time he opened his eyes, he looked for me. My dad isn't even that worried about me." "That's our job," one of the agents said. "But I feel there's more going on. I know it for sure. So why does he not like women? Does he dislike all women, or is it just because one woman hurt him?" "We should go inside to talk about this," said the agent. "This story will take a while to tell." When we got into the small house, the four of us gathered in my room. The two British agents laid down for a nap while Paulie got ready for our trip to town for the festival. Later that evening, the main part of the festival was 2 nights away, but Paulie needed to be there for the start. The two agents, Gail and Patty, began to unwind. I saw they still had their guns on, but they took off their jackets. Patty then started to share everything she knew about Rick. "Okay, the reason he doesn't like women is... Well, you were right. It's all because of one woman. He's really not what you might think, ma'am. He was a star quarterback in high school. He was so good that lots of colleges wanted him to play for them. He went to visit some schools where they tried hard to convince him to join their team. But something at the University of Michigan caught his attention. Patty said, "Let me guess." I replied, "They offered him the starting quarterback spot right away, right?" "Not at all," Patty said. "He chose something that the football team didn't even have." "Are you saying he went to college just for the classes?" I laughed. "No, ma'am," Patty said. "He picked that school for a different reason, a reason for an 18-year-old boy." "I'm sure he learned something," I said. "But was it really about school?" Patty shook her head. "No, he cared about a girl. And she wasn't just any girl. She had just been named Miss Michigan and was going to try for Miss America. Their relationship was kind of strange." "In what way?" I asked. "Well, she's older than he is," Gail said. "That's not too strange anymore," I replied. "But there's more to it," Patty said. "But you said she was Miss America and he played football," I said. "Did he get hurt? Why didn't he go pro?" "He quit," Patty replied. "A few months after the Miss America pageant, she got pregnant. He left the team." "He what?" I asked, surprised. "There has to be a way for them to make it work." "That's what he did," Patty said. "He was going to join the army, but instead they helped him. They paid for his college classes and gave him a paycheck. He's done really well and is now a great agent, but life at home has not been good. She was not loyal to him, and he's been trying to divorce her." "How long has he been trying to get away from her?" I asked. "About 3 years," Patty said. "She fights him hard, and with him away for work, it hasn't helped." "Okay, so he just needs better lawyers and a way to get through the rules. Half of all marriages end in divorce. That shouldn't make him angry with all women," I said. "It should just make him dislike his wife." "Ma'am, you still don't get it. He's the kind of guy who cares deeply. He really loved that woman, but in the end, she did something he just can't forgive, and she keeps doing it. Plus, she's the only woman he's ever been with. It's really hard. It's so sad," I said. "I can almost feel what he's going through." For the first time, Rick, I really didn't like my job. I was working hard, but it felt like I was the only one who saw something wrong here. I was used to looking for hidden dangers, so I noticed problems all around. Normally, when my team got to a place, we checked every spot where trouble might come from. We knew we couldn't protect a whole city. That was just not possible. Still, we tried to make sure the paths our people used were as safe as we could make them. This time, since we were in a friendly place and this job wasn't about politics or meetings, everyone seemed to be more relaxed. Agent May wouldn't stop bothering me. He kept saying I should relax on one hand and that I should shave on the other. It felt like he thought looking nice was more important than being safe. That didn't make any sense to me. The best part was that he let me pick the shift I wanted to work. I chose the night shift for a couple of reasons. First, it let me sleep during the day or take care of my personal things. We had access to the palace and they had Wi-Fi. That meant I could talk to my lawyer about my divorce. I wanted to get custody of my daughter. I couldn't leave her with Danielle anymore. The second reason I liked working nights was that it kept me away from Miss Cameron. The other day when she told me to leave her alone, I felt really embarrassed. The other agents teased me about it a lot. A good agent should blend in and not attract attention. But for some reason, she noticed me and I didn't like it. She and a few of her friends started talking to me, which made things awkward. "Hey, Rick, how big are those English girls?" some guys asked. "I heard she got really close to you." "Don't even think about it," another guy said. "Rick only has eyes for the Cameron woman." The bad part? There was some truth to it. I had seen Millicent Cameron at the White House many times before this job. Usually, I just saw her from a distance. She liked to stay far away. This wasn't just about politics. She also wanted to keep her distance from her parents. She made sure that her actions wouldn't make them look bad. Millicent shared her thoughts on many important topics. Her ideas about the environment, how people impact the earth, and women's rights were very different from what her father's political party believed. The issue was that this was the first time I was really close to her, and I couldn't pretend otherwise. I found her very appealing. Seeing her in the news or on TV didn't show the little things about her that you can only see up close. Her hair was bright and golden, and even though she wasn't as curvy as a famous model, she was very lovely in her own way. Millicent Cameron might be the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. She wasn't distant or cold like some women can be. When I watched her talk to her assistant, the princess, or even the two female agents, She treated them all like equals. Many people in power often act like they're better than those who are not. They usually speak to regular people in a way that makes them feel small. But Miss Cameron didn't act like that at all. She had little habits that made her feel down to earth when she thought no one was looking. She would bite her lip when she was deep in thought, and it made me wish for more. But that was the problem. I shouldn't think about her like that. My job was to protect her. Nothing more, nothing less. I didn't like how Agent May dealt with things. He was way too calm. He even told me to go have a drink in town. I was supposed to be working until midnight. He wanted me to, as he put it, relax a bit. He thought if I was tense, it would make everyone around us nervous. I didn't trust Prince Gregor either. He seemed nice, but I felt there was something off about him. He looked like the type of prince who would be waiting for his father to die so he could take charge. It seemed to me that he wanted power right away. I sensed trouble was coming for the whole country, and I didn't want Millicent here when it happened. There was also a group of terrorists causing problems around the country. The army mostly kept everyone in line, but I was worried they might cause trouble during the festival in 2 days. I didn't like the idea of Millicent walking around the town with just a couple of agents, Gail and Patty, watching her. They were good at their jobs, but maybe my feelings about this weren't very professional. Honestly, even if Gail and Patty looked like movie heroes, I still wouldn't trust them to keep her safe. I really only trusted myself to take care of things. Prince Gregor was a bit old-fashioned. He wanted everyone to follow the region's religious rules very closely. The princess and their dad were more modern. They wanted to make the country and its laws better. I wondered what this country would look like in 20 years. I noticed something strange. The terrorists nearby seemed to have ideas similar to Gregor's. I could see him trying to connect with them if he ever took charge. While I was there, I looked closely at the area. The city we were in was not important for the military. It was just a busy trade city. Its best feature was that it was near the border. Millicent Bungalow was only 5 miles from Russia. I went to the palace and used Google Earth to plan my route to the Russian border. It was smart to have a way to escape. It felt odd. My dad and granddad had served in the military and dealt with the Russians, but now we were on good terms, so the Russians were my best option if something went wrong. I wanted to relax a bit. May suggested going out for a drink, which sounded nice. I don't drink, but taking a break seemed like a good idea. I didn't need more sleep. After May woke me for babysitting, I had gone back to sleep for a couple more hours. I caught a ride with some workers from the palace. They told me about a quiet bar in town. I found a small booth in the back and took out my notebook to write. I watched the people come and go. They sure knew how to drink. There was one farmer who came in every half hour. Other people told me that the local whiskey was very strong. I wasn't sure I could walk, much less drive a tractor after all that to drink. I had written a few good lines of poetry when she walked in. It was only about 6:30 in the evening, and I didn't have to report for my late shift until 11:30. "Is it okay if I sit with you?" she asked. I always found how people from Britain spoke to be interesting. We used the same words, but they sounded a bit different. Looking at her, I felt like she wanted me to say it was okay for her to sit down. "That's fine," I said. "Please, have a seat." "Are you busy?" she asked. I replied, "I was just writing in my notebook." She said, "Well, now that I'm here, you don't have to do that anymore." She smiled. "I actually like writing," I told her. "It helps me think about what's going on and how I feel." "Oh," she replied. "I wanted to hear what you think about something." "Me? Why do you want my opinion?" I asked. I wasn't completely sure about her, so I turned on a recorder in my jacket pocket just to be safe. "Well, you're a guy," she said with excitement. "You're a good-looking young man. Sometimes we see things differently because of where we come from, even though we're not kids anymore. We feel more like family now. I wouldn't want to mess things up." I asked, "What do you mean, family?" She replied, "I'm talking about America and Britain, not about us." She smiled. I shrugged. "If you want to talk about cars, I can only tell you about American ones." "Wait, do they still make British cars?" I asked. "Yes, Aston Martin and Jaguar are still around," she said. "But I wasn't asking about cars," she interrupted. "Next week I'm going to a party in New York. It's a jeans and t-shirt event where we can dance and have fun. What do you think of my shirt?" She opened her jacket and I was surprised. Carmela Bingham is not shy at all. She was a nice-looking Englishwoman. She was a bit heavier than what I usually prefer, but everyone said she was beautiful. Under her coat, Carmela wore tight jeans that showed off her shape. She also had on a very thin t-shirt that didn't cover much. She was holding the sides of her shirt together, and I could see her skin and the color of her veins. It was clear she wasn't wearing a bra. The shirt had a saying on it that caught my eye when she let go of it. I found it hard to think as I stared at her. "I didn't want you to be distracted by my bra," she said with a laugh. "So I didn't wear one." I noticed that if she took a deep breath, the shirt moved a little too much. Luckily, the two guards with her were looking away. She quickly closed her coat when she thought I had noticed what she wanted me to see. "So, did you like what you saw?" she asked. "What was your question again?" I replied, trying to focus again. She laughed, and I have to say I really liked her laugh. It was bright and lively with a playful feel. She seemed like the type who went after what she wanted. "Let's keep it simple," she said. "If I were your girlfriend, would you let me go to a party looking like this?" "If you belonged to someone else, I'd enjoy the view," I replied. "If you were mine, I'd let you wear that at home, but not in public." "Have you heard the saying, 'If you've got it, show it'?" she asked. "Have you heard that someone with a gun can end up with two?" I answered. She nodded and smiled. "Isn't that one of your American rules? If you commit a crime with a gun, you get at least 2 years in jail, right?" "Exactly," I said, "but for you, it's more like one person with 2 guns will get noticed." "What does that mean?" she asked, still smiling. "It means that in New York, you need to be careful at that party. A lot of guys will think you should do more than just stand there looking nice, whether you want to or not." "Sure. Here's the rewritten text in simpler language. I'm always ready for fun." She smiled. "So, should we go to your place or mine?" I said. "Both," she squealed. "Oh, I love a man with energy." "Should we go?" I meant that she should go to her place and I would go to mine. I explained, "The festival starts in about an hour, and I'll be there to work, or just to enjoy it. I need to get ready now, so let's meet another time, okay?" I said, "another time," to make her feel better. She took it to heart. Nothing could slow her down. "You can count on it," she said. She pulled her coat tightly around herself and left the bar. I looked at the poem I had started and tore the page from my notebook. I left the crumpled paper on the table. Then, I quickly wrote down my thoughts about what had just happened. I left $10 on the table for the 2 sodas I had and went outside to grab a ride home. "Mommy, is that man your friend going to live with us?" asked Katrina. "Yes, sweetie, but only for a little while," I replied. "I don't like him, Mommy. He's not nice. Why can't Daddy be here if we need a man?" "Katrina, your daddy travels a lot for work. Sometimes mommies and daddies don't live together because they don't get along." I told her that. She asked me why they don't get along. I started to explain that Daddy has his own problems, but then I thought it wouldn't be smart to say more. "Daddy left you and me when he went to work. Sometimes I kept talking." "And Mommy?" "Well, Mommy felt lonely and did something really bad. It hurt Daddy a lot. That's why he doesn't want to be with Mommy now. This makes Mommy very angry, and then she does more silly things. Daddy gets even madder at her." "Why can't you just say sorry and stop doing bad things?" she asked. "Sometimes I wish I could, sweetie," I said, "but being an adult is not easy." "Danielle!" Danny shouted from the other room. "Rena, go to your room and play," I told her as I walked into the living room. My body hurt, and this couch was uncomfortable and smelled bad. "I need another pain pill!" he yelled. "This isn't worth it. Once my foot gets better, I don't care what you say. I'll get some guys and settle the score. The pain I feel now is nothing compared to what I'll do to him." "Donnie, did you see how your tough friend put down his gun and left when he found out who Rick really was?" I asked. "Yeah, but he didn't have his foot broken or get hurt like I did," Donnie replied. "Now I have to get back at that guy. Marinelli might not want to work with me anymore because of this. Do you know how much money I could lose? Your husband makes it harder for me to help you get out of this trouble," he said. "Why can't I just live with you?" I asked. "Oh, sure," he laughed. "Like my wife is going to let me bring another woman into the house. You're married?" I asked, surprised. "Of course I'm married," he snapped. "What, you think because I'm heavy I can't find a woman?" "No, but I started. I thought that week. I realized I had messed up again in a long line of mistakes in my life. You called me a bad name, Donnie. I said I'm not like that. He just laughed. All right then. What do you call yourself? What's a nice way to say a woman who sleeps with men just for what she can get? A bad name would mean more than just promises. Those women want money, and they want you, Donnie. Call one of your friends. I want you to leave. Why are you upset? He asked. I just turned and walked up the stairs to my daughter's room. Katrina was sitting on her bed, watching TV. Her room was the best part of the house. She had beautiful paintings on all the walls. The ceiling was dark blue, covered in stars that glow in the dark. She had a big flat-screen TV with all the channels. There was a computer in one corner and a big toy box in the other. Rick had done all of that for her. He gave me a lot more money for child support than most people get. He never said no to anything Katrina wanted. The sad thing was that he had once loved both of us very much, but I was too jealous and too blind to see it for most of my life. I didn't want to become like my mother. Yet here I was, living just like she had. The only thing missing was 5 more kids. The reason there weren't more kids was simple. Rick. If Rick hadn't been so smart, I might have kept making the same mistakes. If I had gotten pregnant again, we would never know if it was really his child. Rick was different from my dad. For one thing, Rick cared about his daughter. Even though Rick loved me and I hurt him a lot, he wouldn't give up his pride and respect for me like my dad did for my mom. I thought that even if Rick found out, he would give me another chance. I believed that once we had Katrina, he would love her enough to forgive me. I hoped he would want to keep a closer eye on me so it wouldn't happen again. I thought he might take a desk job and we could all be happy together. But now I could see that Rick would never go along with my plans. No matter what I tried, he was set on getting a divorce. The best thing for me to do now was to find a way to get some money to live on. My need to show Rick how I felt just made things harder for me. For the past year, I thought I would marry Donnie once everything got better. I didn't think I would need any money from Rick. I also had to worry about the videos and pictures Rick took. If he showed them to someone from Child Protective Services and they believed him, he might get custody of Katrina. I could end up with nowhere to live. The house looked bad because Rick only took care of Katrina's room. He never fixed anything else. He made it clear that he thought I had ruined our marriage and that his only concern was for his daughter. If he got custody of her, what would happen to me? Emily, Liz, Gail, and I were watching as some helpers and hairdressers helped Polly get ready for the festival. Beth was in the shower and Patty was off doing something nice for me. It wasn't part of her job as a Secret Service agent, but it was something good friends do. Then, the door to the big room opened, and Carmelo walked in with a big smile. She wore a long coat, and if I didn't know better, I might have thought she wasn't wearing anything underneath. The things she didn't surprise me anymore. It felt like she was playing a game with me. Maybe it was because, as Gail said, people around the world called her the English version of me. It seemed like she wanted to show she was more wild and free. If she wanted that title, she could have it in my eyes. She sat down on the couch next to me. I could smell her, and it really bothered me. I wondered why she hadn't taken a shower. "You'll probably see him in a couple of nights," she teased. "I think he will end up being yours." "So you're giving up?" I asked. "Not at all," she said with a smile. "But I won't want him by then. There are too many guys out there for me to pick just one. After I spend a little time with them, I start to feel bored." I felt angry. I wanted to grab her and shake her. "Are you sure it's not that they get bored with you?" I shot back. "Maybe your charm goes away after a night or two." I went from being nice to a bit harsh. "Not tonight," she said. I didn't even need to be charming. My looks worked just fine. He couldn't take his eyes off me. She opened her coat and I saw her t-shirt. It was really bold. I could see a lot of her skin. "Did he see you like that?" I said, feeling mad. "Of course," she smiled. That was the idea. "So, did you spend the night with him?" I asked. "A lady never tells," she said with a grin. "What does that have to do with you?" I said, getting more upset. "Are you getting mad?" she asked with a smile. "Are you just jealous because someone else used your toy?" she asked. "No," I replied. "I'm just tired of you coming in here and talking about things that may or may not have happened. I have a hard time staying focused." "I get bored fast," I continued. "You came here to bother me, but I really don't care about what you do or who you do it with. All you have are rumors and a bad attitude." As she bent down to pick something up, I saw marks on her chest and neck. Then she pulled out something that made me really angry. "I got a souvenir," she said, showing me a badge from the U.S. Secret Service. I recognized it right away. So much for rumors. She smiled meanly. "But I don't want us to feel bad toward each other," she said. "We have a lot in common. I just wanted to give you a heads up. The one way we're different is what you call morals." "I don't take anything seriously," she continued. "If I meet a guy I like, we have a quick fling and that's it. I don't care who you were with before me or who you might be with later. You seem to have a lot of long relationships that don't really go anywhere. I think the big difference between us is that I am having more fun. I just want you to know that I've been in a similar spot too. I don't want any hard feelings. We had our little game and now it's over. I'll be done with him in a day or two. You can choose if you want to go for him or stay away. It's your choice. If you want, you can try to take him from me. That might be interesting and fun, since not much else is these days." As Carmela walked away humming a silly song, Gail and Liz came over to me. "You know she's probably lying, right?" said Gail. "That doesn't sound like him." I told them she had his badge. I stood up and walked away, looking for a place where I could be alone to cry. Rick. As I saw the women leave the bungalow and get into the limo for the festival, I noticed something strange. Millicent was not with them. I approached the agent who was supposed to look after her and asked what was happening. "I'm really frustrated," he said. "I wanted to go to the festival, but at the last minute she chose not to go. She sent her assistant, and all the other women went. Now I'm stuck here. I think she might be trying to sneak away somewhere dangerous. We even had to separate because May thought Annie should go to the festival to keep an eye on Millicent's assistant if she leaves the area. I need to call for another agent to help me. So I guess I'll just be standing here for another 4 hours until you show up." "I can take over now," I said. "It's not like I'm busy." "I thought you'd be at the festival with BB. Everyone knows she likes you." "Who is BB?" I asked the tall British woman with blue hair. He smiled and waved his hands as he talked. "She's not my kind," I said, shaking my head. "You go have fun. I'll take care of this." I took his spot and watched the bungalow. My job was to look at the entrances and make sure no one unexpected came in. If someone wanted to see Millicent, I would help them find her and make sure they were safe. Gail and Patty would stay with her all the time, and if there was real danger, they were ready to jump in. I was just the gatekeeper. While I stood there, I thought about a poem I had written about my job not long ago. I had thrown it away when the English woman came to talk with me. I started to write it again as I kept watch through the night. Some things happened during the early evening while I worked. Gail came out to get Millicent something to eat. She looked at me as if I had done something wrong, but we didn't have time to chat. It was almost midnight when the women came back from the festival. They were all smiling and sharing stories about what they had seen and done. 2 British women were tipsy and needed help getting inside the building. "Hey, you! Don't forget our rain check," Carmela said as she walked past me. Millicent, her friend, shot me a look. I just shook my head. I wanted to go into the palace to check my email, but I couldn't leave my spot. My iPhone didn't work there, and I could only get my emails in places with Wi-Fi. The connection inside the palace was too weak to reach my bungalow. I knew my lawyer must have news about my complaint against Danielle by now, so I spent the rest of the evening standing outside the rooms. There were many old cars still driving around. I also saw a few new small cars that fit well on the narrow streets. But one thing really caught my eye and made me stop. Less than half a mile from the palace, I saw a Mustang GT parked in a driveway. It was an older car, but just one model behind. They made that style from 1999 to 2004. The owner really took good care of it. As I looked at the car, I noticed he had changed a lot of things. He put on new brake parts, bigger wheels, and a different exhaust. I stood there watching it, and it made me think of home. Just then, the front door opened, and a short man with a messy beard came out. He had a big smile on his face. He started to talk, but I couldn't understand him, so he switched to English. "Do you like my car?" he asked. "Yeah, it makes me think of mine back home," I replied. I spent another 10 or 15 minutes outside talking with him about Mustangs and life in general. After that, I ran the rest of the way back to my bungalow. I grabbed a snack, took a shower, and went to bed. When I woke up, Liz came right over. "Your eyes look puffy," she said. It felt more like she was scolding me than just saying something nice. "We've been friends a long time, Millie," she continued. "I've never seen you so upset about a guy before." "I don't know, Liz," I said. "For some reason, this guy seems different. I'm not sure why. It started when my parents told me to talk to Rick if I ever needed help. That made me think he would always look out for me, and when I saw him, he looked sort of cute. He seemed a bit lost when that mean guy, Mr. May, picked on him. I wanted to help him too. It feels like I should support him. It's almost like he's already part of my life. That's why I felt so hurt yesterday. It felt like he let me down. The weird part is, I've never felt this bad when a boyfriend actually cheated on me. But Rick and I have hardly talked at all." "Exactly," Liz said. "How do you know you'll actually like him if you do? You might be getting all worked up for nothing. You missed the festival opening last night. We had a great time. Carmela isn't worried like you are. She looked for him for a while, but when she realized he wasn't there, she got drunk and had fun with someone else. Prince Gregor seemed really upset that you weren't around." "Why should Carmela care?" I asked. "She's already with him. She's already chosen. Don't get involved with a guy unless you really want to, and I mean really want to. From what Patty told us, he has been through a lot with women. And like you said, he seems sensitive. Maybe that's why he works so hard. I have something else on my mind, too. I can't prove it, but I think Carmela may have not told the truth to you. We were all there. She came in with marks on her chest, and she smelled strong, like something was wrong." "But how can you be sure it was him?" I asked. "She had his badge," I said. "No, she had a badge," Liz replied. "Every one of the 10 Secret Service agents here has one. I think she's trying to confuse you. When we arrived last night, she was drunk and talking nonsense. He was standing there when she spoke to him. At that moment, it didn't seem very important, but now it feels different. She told him, 'Don't forget our rain check.' That didn't sound like they had done anything together. He just stared at her as if he didn't care about what she was saying. I watched him after she spoke. His face didn't look like someone who did something wrong. He just looked back at her as if she was being silly. But at least they were talking, I thought. I said we could be sure of that. So I'm really losing this game or fight or whatever it is because you aren't trying, Liz said. You said this means a lot to you. Maybe you should go after him instead of waiting, she suggested. What do you mean? I asked. Should I do what she did? Maybe not that much, she replied, but you can be brave about it. That thought made me feel a bit better. I didn't know if Rick would stay in my life forever or just for this trip, but at least I would try instead of running away like a scared rabbit. I felt better as I thought about what I would do. But then everything changed when Patty walked in. Hey, I need to tell you something, she said. Stop talking about that guy, I replied. It's strange since you're older than me. All right, she smiled. Carmela is definitely playing games with you. They were sitting together at a bar for about 15 minutes yesterday, and then he left before she came in. He was just sitting there drinking a soda and writing in his notebook. They didn't leave together. In fact, she walked away from him. Then Patty handed me a wrinkled piece of paper. I opened it and saw some messy writing. I hope he writes better than this, I joked as I began to read it. My heart felt softer. Girl, there's no moon tonight, just the light from your window. The night has nothing for you to fear. I'll be standing guard right here. I looked at Patty, surprised. Is this a poem? I asked. I think so, she answered. I read more. Every day I look away when we meet. Every night I'm walking up and down your street. I'm standing outside your window. I'm going a little crazy. I can't let this go. I asked, do you think he wrote this about me? Well, of course, she said, rolling her eyes. I'm driving him crazy. Really? I replied, still surprised. Of course, she said again. I looked back at the note. You'll never see this lonely watch I keep while you sleep. Do you really think he's only talking about his job? I said. Did you catch the part where he's losing his mind? She asked. And that second part, if he didn't really like you, it would seem pretty weird. I looked at the paper again to understand better. Don't think your dreams are as private as they seem, because I know every move you make, from midnight till you wake, while you sleep. Okay, I said. That makes it clear this is about me. He stays awake and keeps an eye on me from midnight until morning, but I don't understand why Mr. May asked him to do that. It seems like he might be upset with both of us. The only time I really get close to him is when I'm asleep. But that doesn't mean he feels anything for me outside of work. Miss Cameron, Patty started. Just call me Millie, I said. Don't add the model part. That gets people in trouble, I joked. Do you know who thinks he knows everything I will do next? The only person I can think of is my husband. He thinks this because he has spent so much time with me and thinks about me a lot. Doesn't that sound like he cares about you? Maybe not just as a co-worker? She asked. But what about him and Carmela? I said. First of all, we don't even know if there is a him and Carmela, she replied. Liz doesn't think anything happened, and I don't either. Actually, you should ask him to talk privately. You've heard Liz's side, now it's time to hear his, she suggested. Liz said that even if something did happen, which we all thought was unlikely, we should pull him away from her. Didn't you say yesterday that he was yours? No one takes anything from Millicent Cameron, right? Right, I smiled and agreed. Polly, where can I quickly get a t-shirt printed in town? Ricky woke up feeling strange from the very start. My mind was all over the place. I was beginning to feel like the other guys when I looked at them. It felt more like a holiday than working. As I got dressed, I looked at my clothes like they were new. My dark suit seemed out of place, especially since I had hours until I needed to wear it. Instead, I chose jeans and a loose leather jacket. Even if it wasn't a cold day, I wanted my jacket to hide my things. I had my Sig Sauer P229, a .357 caliber gun, which felt like a part of me, so I wore it under the jacket. I had slept well for 8 hours and woke up alone. I also made sure to take my ID and badge with me. I looked at my phone on the nightstand and saw that I had the same work shift as the day before. I'd gone to bed around 10 in the morning, so it was still only 6 in the evening. In about 4 hours, I could check Miss Cameron's schedule and see where she would be. That gave me plenty of time before my shift began. I decided to return to the same small bar I visited yesterday. I remembered they served food, too. I hoped that loud woman wouldn't be there again. She was probably still sleeping off her hangover, getting ready to go out again. It amazed me how some women could drink a lot and then party just as hard the next night. I was only 28 and I couldn't do it. But I guess I'm different from them. Carmela and Millicent loved to party. They grew up knowing all about having fun. I was more focused on my family. I bet Danielle, when she was younger, could have kept up with them. Just thinking about Danielle brought back all the pain she caused me. I still can't believe how someone who said she loved me could hurt me so much. It felt like the woman I loved wasn't really who she pretended to be. She just waited for the perfect time to bring me pain. For 3 years, she made me question who I was. Each time she felt like it, she would hurt me. What happened a few days ago wasn't even the worst. It was just the latest heartbreak. The worst moment was the first time I came home and saw Danielle with one of our neighbors. I lost control and hurt him badly. I even called the police myself since I was a federal agent. They took him away quickly. Not many people understand how stressful it is to risk your life every single day. Only police, soldiers, and others in dangerous jobs know how it feels. When you're at work, all you think about is getting home to your loved ones. That thought pushes you and helps you get through hard times. All I could think about was being with my lovely wife again. I dreamed of us getting older together, but when I walked in and saw Danielle with our neighbor, I felt my heart break. I don't think I ever really got over that moment, at least not until it was too late. My bosses never found out what happened. The neighbor made up a story about being hurt and robbed. He didn't want his wife to know the truth. As soon as he could, he called me to the hospital. He asked me not to tell anyone, even after everything we had been through. He hurt me badly and said I deserved it. But why should my wife have to suffer? I didn't want her to face any pain over this. Did I really want to lose my job because of it? I didn't want to lose my job then, because my life depended on 4 important things. They were Danielle, our 5-year-old daughter, my job, and my Mustang. I had already lost Danielle. I knew I would have less time with my daughter. Losing my job would be too hard to handle, so I agreed to stay quiet. He was able to save his marriage, which was good for him since his wife worked hard and cared for him deeply. She cared for him so much that they moved away from our neighborhood just days after he got better. Danielle felt happy about this. If their marriage could survive, then ours could too. She really believed that until she saw me packing to leave. We had a big fight then, but I left anyway. Since that day, Danielle and I barely talk. We only speak about Katrina and the divorce. Nothing else seems important to me. Friends told me that Danielle missed me and still loved me after I left. They said she wanted to talk to me. They thought I owed her that after all we went through together. But her actions showed me that her words didn't mean much. I had given everything to Danielle in our marriage, but it just wasn't enough. So she wanted to talk to me. What does that matter? Did I feel weak for walking away instead of trying to fix things? No, I didn't. Courage can show up in different ways. In my job, I learned to understand my opponent. I knew when I could win and when I couldn't. You have to know when to stand your ground and when to back off. I loved Danielle deeply, but that made me open to hurt. She didn't love me the same way I loved her, and that gave her power over me. I would have done anything to support her and make her happy. I loved her more than I loved myself. I would never betray her, but she broke my trust and was unfaithful with one of our neighbors. She even said that if I took another job, she would do it again. There was no way she could love me even a little and still act that way. I knew I couldn't win, so it wasn't fear that made me leave. I had to pick my battles, and this was not one I could win. I wasn't scared, but I had been naive since the first time I met Danielle. I thought she was like a fairy tale princess. I believed she was meant for me. At least that's what I thought. Finding out that she was just in my head changed everything. After that, I couldn't bear to look at her. The thought of us being together and having a child really upset me. I turned down every chance to make things better with her. Each time I remembered how Danielle acted, I felt angry at all women. I walked to the bar, which was still calm when I arrived. I ordered my usual $5 soda and felt cheerful enough to take on a regular at the old pinball machine. I had played pinball and video games since I was a kid, so I was comfortable with 2 out of 3 balls left. I was almost halfway to beating the high score as I launched my second ball. It flew across the machine, bouncing off the bumpers and lighting up the scores. Then I noticed 2 neat hands on the glass next to mine. I saw the trench coat and thought it might be that annoying English woman again. I was really focused on the game when I heard her say she wouldn't mind talking to someone else. I looked into her eyes for the first time, but quickly looked away. That made my ball fall between the paddles. It landed on one, and I didn't react fast enough. My opponent smiled widely and took his chance. "You shouldn't be here without your bodyguard, ma'am," I said. "It's against the rules." "I have you here," she replied, "and I came to talk to you." "Why do you want to talk to me?" I asked. "Did I do something wrong?" "You tell me," she said. "But let's sit at a table. I'm sure the pinball player doesn't care about our talk." I put $5 on the machine and he quickly took it, showing me his crooked teeth as he smiled. I chose a booth in the back where I could see the door and everyone coming in and out. "Did you sit in this booth yesterday?" she asked. "No," I replied. "What does where I sat yesterday have to do with anything?" "I never said you did anything wrong," she answered. "This is all going wrong. It shouldn't be this hard. Did you treat Carmela like this yesterday?" I looked at her confused. "It really shouldn't be this difficult," she said it again. "Miss Cameron, what is this about?" I asked. She glanced around the bar, looking worried, then opened her trench coat. Her chest was bigger, but I looked nice, too. She said she was wearing a t-shirt. It wasn't like the one the British woman had on. It was thicker and more covered up. She wore a bra and a tight, long skirt. But what really caught my eye was her shirt. Like the English woman's, her shirt had 2 lines of words, but it was not as bold, though I could still understand it. The first line said, "I came here to drink and have fun." The word fun was bigger than the rest. The second line said, "I'm almost done drinking." I quickly leaned over the table and pulled her coat closed so no one else would see. "Why did you do that?" she asked angrily. "You didn't do that with Carmela." "How do you know what happened with Carmela?" I answered. I asked her why she said you were with her. She spoke loudly and looked like she was about to cry. I could tell she wasn't telling the truth. I tried to calm her down. "That's not true," she said sharply. She showed me your badge, which was still lying near her bed. "Why can't you just say you were with her so we can move on?" "I don't care about the past. I'll forgive you if you promise not to do it again." I didn't say anything. I was about to speak again, but she cut me off. "I can't stand liars," she said. "More than anything. I argue with my dad sometimes. He makes promises but doesn't keep them. Then he talks about politics like that makes it okay. I hate liars too, I said, feeling frustrated. I took out my recorder and played the last part of my talk with Carmela from the day before. Her eyes got wide as she listened. "Oh, I'm always ready for that," she said with a smile. "So, is it your place or mine?" "Both," I replied back. "Oh, I really like a guy who can keep up with me," she squeaked. "Shall we? I met you at your place and you meet me at mine." I explained. "The festival is starting soon and I need to get ready. Can we plan for another time?" "So you didn't leave with her?" she asked, looking surprised. "You turned her down even though she was pretty." I nodded and pressed play on the recorder. "You need to hear this. Part 2, I said as I played the tape. She listened to Carmela speaking. "Let's keep it simple," she said. "If I were your girlfriend, would you let me go to a party in this outfit? If you were with someone else, I said I would enjoy the view. If you were mine, I'd let you wear that at home, but not in public." She hugged her coat tighter around herself, and tears started to fall. "There's one more thing you need to know," I said, opening my jacket to show my ID and badge. Whoever gave her a badge, it wasn't from me. "I don't know what's happening between you two, but there's nothing between us. There never has been, and there never will be." She leaned back in the booth. "I'm sorry, I thought you were joking," she said. "Can I ask you about this?" She placed a piece of paper on the table. It was smooth, no longer wrinkled. I recognized it as the paper I had ripped from my notebook. I looked at my watch. "Shouldn't we get you back home so you can get ready to go out with your friends?" "I see people outside getting ready for the festival," she said. She laughed, and her voice was sweet, like a nice tune. I understood why many guys liked her. When she smiled, it was like a sunny day after rain. "I'm not ready for that question," she said with a grin. "I skipped the festival last night. Now I feel like having some fun, but not too much." "You need to keep it under control, too. Do you have a car, or are you going to walk me home?" We ended up walking 4 blocks back to her place. "I'll give you some time to think of an answer," she teased. "I'll get back early. I don't want you to share personal things while you're working. By 11:30 or even 11 o'clock, you should have an answer, okay?" She smiled, and I nodded, feeling a bit uneasy. We were only about 50 yards from her home when I raised my arm to stop her. I just wanted to signal her, but she took it differently. "I don't mind you touching me," she said. "I'd rather it be you than anyone else, but please be gentle at first." I quickly pulled her down behind a car as a military truck drove out of the palace gates. It went in the direction we had just come from. I took out my gun and held her hand. We crouched behind the cars, and the darkness of the early evening helped keep us hidden. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Was that a tank?" "It was an armored vehicle," I replied. "Please be very quiet." We moved toward a spot in the wall with no guard or gate. It was near the garden. The palace was mostly just for show. I'm sure there were fights over this place long ago, back before they had big machines for war. I remember the spot I saw on the tour the day before. There was a big opening, and the wall was about 9 feet high. I ran next to it and jumped up, grabbing the top. I pulled myself up with just my fingers and looked over. It was dark, but I could hear voices. "Come on," she said. "Follow me." I shrugged and walked behind her. She stopped in front of a drain cover. "Lift that up," she said strongly. I looked at her in surprise. "Just do it," she insisted. I did what she said, and she jumped down into the dark space below. I carefully lowered myself over the edge and held on tightly. I was lucky I hadn't just jumped down, or I would have landed right on her. Polly told me about this place. She whispered, "There are 3 of these around the walls." She learned about them from her grandfather. Even her father and brother forgot about them. She used secret paths to help boys come in and out of the palace. The real paths are round metal covers. This tunnel took us to a room in the palace. We crawled through the tunnel just as she said and found ourselves in a storage room. We looked out through a small crack in the door and saw the area around the bungalow. About 10 or 12 men in military clothes and ski masks had everyone lined up in front of the bungalow. "Where is she?" asked the leader. "I don't know," said Mr. May. "This isn't about politics, she's just visiting a friend." The man suddenly hit me hard in the stomach. I bent over and fell down. "Stop!" yelled Polly. "He is a guest of the royal family. You will regret this." The man then slapped Polly. Prince Gregor stepped forward and spoke to him for hitting my sister and our guest. "You will pay for this! When my army helps us, you will all be punished." "How will we be punished?" the man asked. "You don't know who we are." As I watched the two men, I felt something wasn't quite right. "They want you," I told her. "We need to leave. We can go back through the tunnel." "The soldiers of Manhattan will help us," she replied. "I don't think that's going to happen," I said. "Why not?" she asked. "Because I think Gregor is involved in this too," I answered. "Think about it. We've seen a lot of people in military clothes around the palace these days. How could 10 or 12 men defeat them?" "Something isn't right, Rick," she said. "You're just being too protective of me," she added with a small smile. "And now I understand why." We went back through the tunnel and came out where we started. We crouched behind cars and made our way back toward the town. As we got to the bar we had just left, I pulled her into the shadows when a group of men approached. They were all wearing the same military outfits and ski masks as the men at the palace. There were no soldiers in sight. The men pulled everyone out of the bar. We watched as they started asking questions. One by one, they went through the crowd. When they got to my pinball friend, he smiled and told us we had vanished like smoke. Then one of the men shot him in the stomach and left him hurt and alone. "We need to go now," I said again. We ducked into an alley and I climbed over a wall. I spotted some clothes hanging on a line and jumped back over. "Put these on," I told her. "If you want to see me without clothes, just ask," she replied with a smile. "Millie, this is serious," I said. "I know, Rick," she answered. "I was there. I saw that guy you were playing with get shot. I'm scared too. I'm just trying to keep things light." I put on the clothes I'd grabbed. We looked like a couple of local people now. This might help us fit in, but maybe not enough. They were searching for a couple, so they stopped every pair they found. As we stepped out of the alley, we noticed a group of people running away from the town. Millie and I joined them and ran too. Whenever we paused, I heard bits of what was going on. A group of men broke into the palace. A woman shouted that the king was dead. They had killed all his guards. I couldn't believe it. How could so few men reach the king with so many soldiers around? Those men shouldn't have been able to reach Millie. Someone must be helping them. It couldn't be Polly or the other women. They would know where Millie was and when. If they were part of it, they would have sent the men to the bar first, not to the bungalow. As we ran down the street, we slowed to a walk. Then, out of nowhere, 3 men with guns jumped in front of us. The crowd stopped and raised their hands. The men asked questions in Russian and Czech. These are 2 languages spoken in Pacman Stand. Each person in the crowd answered, and then the men moved on. I knew a little Russian and could speak it somewhat, but I was afraid I wouldn't trick them. I wasn't sure if Millie spoke any language except English. The man asking questions reached the woman next to Millie and told her to take off her scarf. I moved closer, putting Millie between me and the man. "Why did you switch places, dog?" he shouted. I coughed nervously and quickly pulled him between me and his friends. I shot 2 times into his chest and used him to protect myself and Millie. Then I shot the closest man in the face. The last man was quicker and fired a shot before I got him in the chest. I grabbed Millie's hand and we ran away, leaving the shocked group behind us. As we ran, I looked around and pulled Millie into a small alley. "That was really careless," I whispered, hitting my head with my hands. Millie held tight to my hand. "You should stop that," she said gently. "I kind of like your face." When she looked at me, I didn't just see Millie. I noticed her face, but the way she seemed reminded me of her mom. She had the same calm way that her mom spoke to her dad when he was worried about making a tough decision. At that moment, I could only think of the woman Millie might become someday. Even though we were in danger, she didn't look scared or worried. That made me very uneasy. I did this kind of work for a living. I was trained for it. But I felt really afraid. The only thing that mattered to me was keeping Millie safe. I couldn't think about dying without seeing my daughter again or telling her how much I cared for her. I didn't want to die far from her, letting her learn a twisted story from Danielle. I didn't want my daughter to take in Danielle's ideas about what is right and wrong. I couldn't let her grow up learning her values from someone like Danielle, who I saw in a bad way. "What's wrong?" Millie asked. "I messed everything up back there," I said. "Well, there were guys who wanted to hurt us." She said, "You stopped them. We both got hurt, but we got away. You did well. Now tell me your side." I replied, "My main goal is to keep you safe." "Then you're doing great," she said. After that, she smiled. "We need to find a way to talk to our team. We also need to know what they want, and we should think about supplies. I have one extra clip with 10 bullets. I fired 4 shots from my gun, so we have 16 bullets left. Doesn't that worry you?" "Nope," she said with a smile. "Not at all. I'm with you." "What does that mean?" I asked, feeling down. "I messed up back there. I should have checked the bodies for weapons or even a radio. We could be better off, plus the gunshots must have called someone. We can't go back now." "Okay," she said, still smiling at me. "You have a lot to think about now. I'll give you more time." I was confused. "More time for what?" I asked. "To answer my question," she replied. "I don't want you to think I forgot." I shook my head. "Weren't you scared back there?" I asked. Honestly, she said no. She believed I would keep her safe. Even when that man went to the woman next to me and made her take off her scarf, I thought I might be next. I was afraid of what you would do, but I knew you would help. It all happened so quickly that I could barely figure out what was happening. I shook my head again. "Okay, let's start over," I said. "We have to tell someone we are in trouble." "That might not be a good idea," she said. "Remember, they have spies everywhere in the palace. And like you said, Prince Gregor might be part of this." "I meant someone who can help us," I said. "We need to find a way to get help. The problem is, there is no phone signal here. I think they watch all the radio signals too. I still have my phone, so if we can find a spot with Wi-Fi, we could send an email. We also need a way to escape. We need something quick." Then I smiled. "What?" she asked. "I know where we're going," I said. I turned to Gregor. "Where is he taking her?" I asked the leader of the men who had taken over the palace in just 2 hours. My men were searching the whole town. They looked in every corner of the palace and my sister's small house, but they could not find her. Things were getting worse. I had planned for years, and now everything was coming apart very quickly. I had dreams about how to run our country. We found a new source of energy. It was one of the natural resources we dug up near the mountains south of the city. When we mixed it with a safe liquid, it made a small electrical charge. The miners found this by accident. Then, we brought in students from an American university to help us make it better. Now, we could create strong, bendable batteries that could fit anywhere. These batteries could give power based on how many pellets we used or how much liquid we mixed in. Pacman had something that the world needed in just 1 generation. Pacman in Manhattan could change from being very poor to a strong country. My father always said to be patient and to stay neutral. I didn't have time for that. I love my father and my sister, but they don't see the bigger picture. My sister just wants what she thinks is best for women. She hasn't learned the old lessons that say women should support men. In Manhattan, a man can have as many wives as he can afford. Many men here have multiple wives, and some even have a dozen. But very few of them think about where our country should go in the future. My father, whom I care about a lot, is not one of those men. By the time he finally takes action, the rest of the world might find better ways to make batteries. If that happens, we could lose our advantage very fast. We need to act quickly and make money while we can. We could change from being a small country to a strong one, maybe even the richest in our region. But we need to act fast. Technology moves quickly, and if we wait too long, we might lose everything. This meant we had to make some hard choices. One tough choice was about my father. No one knew that his recent illness was caused by a hidden poison he had been taking slowly for months. Usually it would take him another month or 2 to get really sick and die. But time and fate left me with no choice. Pacman often has an army made up of thousands of soldiers, but they are small and old. I have my own secret group that has hundreds of members. They pretend to be a terrorist group that supports the strictest version of our religion. I started this group because my father decided to end polygamy and give women more rights. They have held many protests, and I publicly speak against them, although I actually organize these protests. I already have 2 wives, but I have wanted a 3rd one for a long time. I dreamed of having my own famous princess, like the fun women I see in newspapers and magazines. When my sister invited Millicent Cameron to the Spring Festival, I decided that she should disappear. That was my first idea. The palace has many secret paths and hidden rooms. I wanted to have some nice-looking young men seen with Millicent during the festival. Then, my men would take her from her room at night. People would think she just ran away for fun. She had done that before. But then things went wrong. First, my sister chose to let her guests stay in her bungalow instead of the palace. She changed the visit into a pajama party with her friends. The second problem was that Millicent brought her own security team. Most of the guards were relaxed, but 2 of the female agents stayed close to her, and some male agents were very alert. I thought the best way to get her would be to use my secret group to cause another problem. This one would be the biggest yet. They would protest against the American presence in Park Manhattan. I don't really know what that means, but it seemed like a good idea. I also decided to let my sick father pass away quietly. I wasn't strong enough to be there when it happened because I do care about him. But his time has come. I even let my sister face some tough times to help her learn. She needs to know that women have limited power in this world, and most of it comes from men. Unlike many other women, my sister won't be harmed or given away, but she still needs to understand her role. I keep playing my part here as a backup plan, which I might not need anymore. By being with the others, I can gain sympathy and maybe even become a hero when people hear what happened. But I feel uneasy and annoyed because my men can't find Millicent Cameron. I'm not sure, Prince Gregor. The commander told me we went to the bar that the staff said was the only place he went while in town. We had to make the workers talk. They said she was there with the American agent. They left, saying they were going back to the palace, but they never showed up. We even had to shoot one rude man who would not tell us anything. Usually, if you shoot one of them, the others will give you the answers you need. But this time, they all seem to know nothing. That's a good idea, I said. But it might not work with these people. I ripped my shirt and took off my gold belt. I put dirt on my face and walked to the kitchen. The man looked at me like I was out of my mind. When I got to the kitchen, I opened a big bottle of ketchup. I had grown to like it when I studied in another country. I usually liked it with fries and hot dogs, but I had none of those now. I dripped some ketchup near my mouth and smeared it on my shirt collar. "How do I look?" I asked. The man just looked at me. I smiled back. "You really did something to me." They didn't see it happen, but when I come out again, they can hardly walk. They will believe it, and they will believe it even more when you shoot one of the workers at the palace. If I give you a sign, shoot one of the visitors. 2, if you can. It doesn't matter which ones, but do not shoot the American woman with dark skin. I want her for myself. She will make Millicent Cameron happy in my group. And don't shoot the larger English woman, because Colonel Ma'am and off want her. You can take the other British woman if you want, or one of the 2 American agents. But I think that may be a bad idea. They would be hard to handle, and if they got away, that would be trouble. Maybe just take the British woman. The 2 Americans should be handled another way. Don't kill the leader of the American agents. I may need him later. Besides that, if you want to teach them a lesson by taking 1 or 2 away, that's okay. We went back outside, and it was starting to get a bit chilly. I figured the cold would make our captives easier to handle and more likely to do what we wanted. When the door opened, I tripped and fell in the dirt right in front of them. I struggled to stand up, and my sister shouted right away, "Gregor!" she yelled. "What have you done to him, you monsters?" She tried to come to me, but one of the masked men hit her again. I could see the shock on many faces as I got on my knees and then stood up tall. I puffed out my chest to show that they had hurt me, but I would never give up. I felt like a hero, and it looked like they believed me. I almost laughed. Maybe I should have been an actor. I thought about my big speech about never giving up. I got that from an old Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. Then a truck pulled up, and one of the soldiers rushed over to me, talking too fast. He nearly messed up everything because he was so excited. Luckily, the leader stopped him by holding his shoulder and giving him a light slap. That leader doesn't run this country anymore. What a fool. He claimed to be good at acting. Maybe I should suggest he deserves an award for his part. One of our patrols found some villagers trying to leave town. We were ordered to stop everyone we saw until we found the woman while asking questions. "One man killed them," said the soldier. "How do you know this?" the commander asked. "We reacted right away when we heard the shots. We caught 2 of the villagers and got them to tell us what happened. We spoke to them one by one, and they both told the same story," said the soldier. "So 1 man killed all 3 patrol members?" the commander asked. "Yes, sir," the soldier replied. "And, sir, From what they said about how he did it, I think it was him. The villagers said the man started the fight, but it didn't happen while we were asking him questions. When they were asking the woman questions, he moved ahead in line to keep her safe. He handled the whole thing really well. He caught the first man by surprise and took him down. Then he used that man to shield himself and the woman from the other two while he shot at them. "Do we know where they went?" the commander shouted. "No, sir." "They ran away right after, and were gone by the time we got here," came the answer. "Well, this changes everything," said the commander. It truly did. I realized that if I didn't find the woman in a few hours, I would have to turn what should have been a simple kidnap into a bloody fight. I had to forget about that woman. There were many other women just as interesting. If she and the man got away, or even just one of them, it would ruin all my plans and might even cost me everything. I gave a small nod to the leader of the U.S. agents and then looked back at the palace. The commander saw this right away. "Take the prince and the man into the palace," he ordered. "Now," he said sharply. But I wouldn't listen. "You've already beaten me once," I shouted, maybe a bit too loud. Once we got inside the palace, I stood tall and began giving orders. Before, my order was to catch the woman alive. But now, I said, "From now on, shoot both her and the man with her on sight." The American guard looked at me in shock. You're the one behind this," he stuttered. "Rick was right all this time." I had told him everything was okay, but he kept saying something felt wrong. "Do you want to live another day?" I asked him. He nodded. "Then act like a smart person and do what I say." As we moved through the streets, we began to slow down. At first, we could run and avoid the soldiers, but soon there were more of them, and they were in bigger groups. Now, trucks filled with soldiers were driving around our area, moving in a pattern and talking between themselves. We had to sneak slowly through backyards and alleys. We had to stay away from places with animals or loud dogs because of the noise. Often we needed to turn around and find a different way to stay hidden. One time, we waited for nearly half an hour while some soldiers took a break to smoke. Instead of looking around, we hid in an empty house that had burned down about 50 feet away. A truck arrived, and a man inside spoke to the soldiers in Russian. I understood some of it, but what I heard made me worried. Millie moved closer and wrapped her arms around my waist. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Their orders have changed," I said. "Now they've been told to shoot us on sight." "No way," she said strongly. "No way." "What do you mean?" I replied. "That's what he said. He also talked about rewards for catching us." She wanted me to explain more. "You need to tell me what this means," she said, holding out a piece of paper from my notebook. "Now?" I asked. She nodded and smiled at me. "I've been waiting for this all day," she said. "It's not a big deal," I said. "I have a notebook where I write my thoughts. It helps me keep my ideas clear. Sometimes it's just messy drawing, quick notes, or lists of things I want to improve. Other times, it's notes on what I see or even short poems." "Keep going," she said, encouraging me. "That's all there is," I replied. "No, it isn't," she said softly, sounding a bit annoyed. "I didn't ask about your notebook. I wanted to know what this piece of writing means. I gave you all day to figure it out." "I guess it was just my thoughts back then," I admitted. In the soft light, I noticed her eyes narrowing. "Do I need to make you explain every part? Or can you talk about it like an adult?" she asked. "You can't take poems too literally," I said. "This one is very clear," she insisted, "and that's how I see it. Since we can't leave until those guys move, you should start explaining. And don't begin with, 'well,' okay? Just look me in the eyes and tell me what's on your mind," I said. Her eyes narrowed even further. Then I got an idea. "It's for a book," I explained. "I want to write a book about a Secret Service agent." "You're lying," she replied. "We both know this isn't really about your job. This poem or part of it is about me. You need to finish it." She crossed her arms and glared at me. "Why is my life such a mess?" I asked. "How is your life messed up?" I replied. "My life is what's really in trouble." "I could fix your problems in 20 minutes with a few phone calls," she said. "But try growing up with everyone watching you. Every time I look at a boy, people make mean comments. I can't date without it being news. Think about this," she continued. "The average girl dates 15 or 20 boys before she finds the one she wants to marry. Some dates are just one time. Others take a few tries to see if it works. She might even spend months or a year with a guy before they break up. I don't get that chance, she said. Every time I go out with someone, it's in the news. Most of the guys who ask me out want to date me for other reasons. They want to be famous or have their own agenda. I'm 24 years old and I think I'm pretty. She went on, I've had more guys who seem more interested in my money or my dad's name than in me as a person. When I think about guys who really wanted to know me, not just because I'm the president's daughter or some star, there's only one I can remember. That was a long time ago. Maybe you should find him on Facebook and marry him, she joked. I tried that, but he's already married with 2 kids. The good ones don't stay single for long. I can tell when someone likes me and why. And you big liar. You like me a lot. It's not just because of your job, so don't even act like that. She looked right at me, but I couldn't keep her gaze. I turned my head like I was watching the guys we were hiding from. Why is it so hard for you to just say it? She asked. You show it every day. Even the other agents see I'm braver than you. I walked into that bar wearing a t-shirt that looked really nice. If anyone took a picture of me, my family would find out and be worried. Watch this, she said. Richard Hammond, They're leaving, I whispered quickly. I wanted to stop her from saying something that could make us both look bad. Later, I said. Many people feel things when they're scared, but those feelings usually go away once the fear is gone. To be continued, she whispered back. We both watched as the soldiers walked away from the direction we needed to go. We stepped out of our hiding spot and quietly moved through the dark alley toward our goal. I had only seen this place during the day, and it looked very different at night. After a few blocks, we had to stop again. 2 soldiers were moving from house to house, searching for us. They weren't knocking on doors, they were looking at yards and porches. I knew it wouldn't take long for them to start going door to door. I felt we were pretty close to where we needed to be. I could see the shape of the palace behind us. We were in the same loop I had run earlier that morning. I gently pulled on Millie's shoulder to stop her, and we started to back away into a nearby alley. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, and a bullet hit the wall right next to us. I pushed Emily away and jumped in front of her when I saw the shooter. I fired 2 shots and he fell down. You got him, Rick, she said. We need to get out of here. You can let me up now. I carefully rolled over so she could stand. Come on, let's go, she urged. I got up and looked around. I was sure that the gunshots had attracted the other 2 men who were checking the houses. What's wrong? She asked. Nothing, I said, telling a little lie. I moved her toward the man I had shot, still watching where the 2 other men might come from. When we got to the body, I noticed he had dropped his radio, and it was broken. That was just more bad luck. But I found his pistol, a gun that looked like a Glock, and put it in Millie's waistband just in case we needed it. I told her she might want to check a bit lower. She joked back, saying it was just in case. Then she looked at me and said, Rick, you're just like my dad. She pointed to my shirt and added, You have this guy's blood on you. When she touched my side, it hurt a lot. I could see her face change. It looked like she might cry. It's not his blood, Millie, I said quickly. She responded, You got shot. That was when you jumped on me, right? I pulled her away from the man as the other 2 people came around the corner toward him. We ducked behind a shed and crawled to the other side. Then we sneaked down the alley and came out on the next block. What are we going to do? She asked. I said, We're going to get you out of here. Rick, if we just turn ourselves in, they will take you to a hospital, she replied. Millie, I told you they were ordered to shoot without warning. If we give ourselves up, they will just kill us. I said I don't think the bullet hit a vital spot or I would be on the ground already. I need to stop the bleeding or at least cover it. It hurts a lot, but I can still move. Let's keep going. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she nodded and followed me. I felt a wave of relief when I saw it. Even in the dark, I could tell it was the car I wanted. We quietly crept past it and went to the side of the house. I tapped on the window softly. I didn't know where the men behind us were. My shirt on the left side was soaked with blood, but I wasn't leaving any drops yet. It took a moment before someone tapped back on the glass from inside. After a few minutes, he came out from the side of the house. When he saw us, he lowered his gun. Are you the one who likes my car? He asked. I nodded. I need help, I said. "You are the dangerous person on the news," he said. "I think they are lying about me," I replied, nodding again. I kept Millie close behind me so he couldn't see her. I told him, "I've been shot. If they find me here, they'll hurt you too. But if you help me, I'll make it worth your time." "Quickly," he said. "Come inside and take this." He gave me an old gun with only 3 bullets. "I'm not alone," I said. Millie peeked out from behind me and smiled. We went into the small house. The first thing I noticed was the computer. "Can you use the internet?" I asked. "Sure," he replied. "It's not very fast, but it works." It was strange to see Google Chrome in Russian. He changed it to English, and I logged on to the Secret Service's safe website. I sent an emergency email to explain who I was and what was going on. After that, my friend brought me a clean shirt, some bandages, and antiseptic. We cleaned my wound and wrapped it up. Thankfully, the bullet hadn't hit anything serious. It was stuck in the soft flesh on my side. I had gotten off easy. It was almost completely dark outside when we got ready to leave. My new friend Pyotr gave us food and water and let us take a break for a bit, but we could hear more trucks and cars nearby. When we checked our things, we found out that Millie's gun was empty. It wouldn't have helped us much anyway, but Peter's revolver wasn't the best backup. As we got ready to go, he said he could keep us safe until someone came to help us. But I told him there was no good place to hide in his small house and they would look everywhere. When things got worse, he turned on his small TV and showed us the news. They had Agent May riding in a truck around the city. He was saying it was all a mistake and that we should turn ourselves in. He promised we wouldn't get hurt if we did. Millie told me we needed to get that bullet out, Millie. "He's lying," I said. "Look how he blinks at the end of every sentence. He blinks 3 times. Someone was making him say those things." She watched closely and nodded. "I would never have noticed that," she said. "Pyotr, thank you for everything you've done. But now, I need to ask you for a big favor." He frowned as he handed me the keys. "Why should I help you after you took my car?" I promised. "If we get out of this, I will get you a brand new car." He replied, "Send me a visa." We sneaked out the back door and made sure no one was waiting outside. We listened carefully but didn't hear anything. We were less than 5 miles from the Russian border, and for the first time I felt sure we would make it. It was 11 a.m., and I was supposed to visit a school in Washington, D.C. I planned to read a story to the kids and show them why reading is important. This was one of the few things I was really looking forward to that day. The teachers and kids greeted me with warm smiles. The kids didn't really know who I was. One child asked me, "Why do you sound like a cowboy?" I told him it was because I was from Texas and used to be a cowboy. Then he said, "I want to be a cowboy when I grow up too." While I read the first chapter of my book, one of my bodyguards came in and stopped me. I froze, feeling the same way President Bush must have felt when he first learned about 9/11s. I gave the book to the teacher, and she started reading while I walked out into the hallway. The reporters in the room could tell something was wrong and tried to follow us, but the bodyguards stopped them. "Mr. President, there's been an incident," my national security advisor said. "What kind of incident?" I asked. He replied, "Well, sir, we just got an email a few moments ago, and you were pulled out because of it." I said, "So, the email is being checked now, but we don't have any details yet." He kept talking. "You took me out of there without checking the facts," I said, feeling surprised. "This better be important. Your job could be at risk." He gulped. "Sir, the email is from a Secret Service agent named Richard Hammond." I felt my heart start to race. "Show me the email," I said. As I read it, I got really angry. I was way too angry to act like a leader. "I want planes in the air right now," I shouted. "Sir, we need to be careful. This could cause an international issue," he said. I stopped walking and stared at him. He turned around, came back to me, and looked serious. "If I make a mistake and start a problem, what's the worst thing that could happen? Maybe a country declares war on us. Maybe I'll get kicked out of office. So what? I'll only be president for 2 more years anyway. I'll be Millie's dad for the rest of my life. It's time for me to go back to the ranch. My daughter is in danger, and so are 11 other people. One of them is a Secret Service agent who got shot while trying to protect her from a small dictator. Right now, I am still the president. I want those planes to take off." The man in charge said carefully, "It's not just a game, sir. The planes need permission to fly over Russia and some other countries. The State Department is on it, and the Russians are helping. They said if she can reach the border, how is she supposed to do that? I asked, my voice full of anger. There are trucks with soldiers looking for them in the streets. Rick is hurt badly, and we don't know how the others are doing. Daniel, I never believed in things like mind reading, but I felt something when the bullet hit Rick. I had just dropped Katrina off at daycare, where I took her every day to keep her away from Donnie and his friends. My life feels like it's falling apart, but I would never let my daughter suffer because of it. I realized my marriage was over. I was so angry that I couldn't think about how my choices hurt others. I have been thinking about this a lot lately. What Rick saw last week destroyed any chance for us to be together again. I tried to make him feel as hurt as I did when he left, but I knew I was the one who hurt him first. Everything I did made him stop caring. The thought that he was hurt and maybe far away made me feel worse than I wanted to admit. It also made me see that I was just like my mother. I thought I could change this pattern, but it was no use. My mother was with many men, but inside she only loved my father. I had also been unfaithful. But unlike my mother, I didn't do it because I wanted to. I did it to escape feeling alone. Sometimes, like with Donnie, I needed money, but I convinced myself that it wasn't being unfaithful. Maybe my mother's life was like mine. We didn't have much money, so maybe she was with those men to help us, like I did with Donnie. I picked up the phone and called the number for Rick's job in Washington, D.C. It was the number he gave me to use if he was away and didn't come back on time. A woman answered the phone and asked who I wanted to know about. I told her Rick's name, and she asked who I was. When I told her, she said that Rick was out and that his work was supposed to finish that day. She said he should return in a day or two and told me to call back then. But he's been hurt, I said. We don't have any news about him right now. Goodbye. She told me she couldn't help at all. Just then, the doorbell rang and I let Donnie in. He looked worried and asked, "Why do you look so upset?" I asked him honestly, "Do you want to cuddle?" Being with him felt better than trying to talk about what was bothering me. Talking about my worries about Rick being hurt felt too hard. "No, babe," he said. "I'm still sore and I'm not sure I can." "Why are you here?" I asked. "I just came to hang out. I needed a break from my wife," he said. I felt a mix of sadness and anger. I had walked away from someone who cared for me, only to be stuck in a dull relationship with a guy I didn't like. He treated me badly and let his friends take advantage of me. I felt really stupid. Ricky started the Mustang, but this time the car's sound didn't make me happy. I knew I couldn't drive fast and stay quiet at the same time, so I just let the car go. I didn't want to make loud tire noises since I didn't want anyone to know where we were. Before we even reached the first block, Millie started to complain. "I'm not using this," she said, sounding annoyed. "Yes, you are," I replied firmly. "You can't make me do anything," she shot back. "Yes, I can," I insisted. "Now get under it." Peter and I had taken off the heavy metal door that led to his storm shelter. It was small, but it was enough for Millie to stay safe. The metal was thick, so bullets from far away probably couldn't get through it. And because it was held at an angle by the car seat and floor, it would even stop bigger bullets to some degree. My plan was to avoid getting shot altogether. I wanted us to follow the idea from Taco Bell ads and quickly find safety. If we faced any trouble, we would turn back and try a different path. "Why don't you have one of these?" she asked. "Because Peter only had one storm shelter," I replied. "And even then, I couldn't see through it while driving. Now get under this and stay low." "Or what?" she asked, sounding tough. "Or I'll never answer your question," I joked. "Ha!" she laughed. "You don't need to answer. I already knew my plan would fall apart after just 2 blocks. When we got to the halfway point of the second block, a group of soldiers jumped out from behind some bushes and started shouting at us. Gregor was sharing his plan because this group included some masked people and a strong line of soldiers working together. "Millie, get under that shield!" I shouted as I stepped on the gas. It was too late to stop. They had already spotted us and were aiming their guns. The car's loud engine roared as we raced away, pushing me back in my seat. In just a few seconds, we were past them, and the sounds of their gunfire faded away. I knew I had to turn at least twice to throw them off. "That wasn't so bad," Millie said, smiling from under the shield. It worked. I felt a few bumps, but nothing got through. "I told you so," I said, smiling back at her. Just then, a truck came toward us at the corner. I pressed the gas again, and the truck couldn't keep up, but it didn't matter. There were enough people with guns in that truck that we were still in trouble. "Get down, Millie," I urged. "You worry too much," she replied. "We didn't get hurt back there, but keep your head down now," I said, my voice tight. Millie's eyes got big, and she bit her lip as tears filled her eyes. I kept swerving the car to avoid getting hit. Once she covered herself, I slowed down. A truck was speeding toward us and got very close. Just when it looked like one of the guys in the back might aim at us, I slammed on the brakes. The truck hit our back and 2 of the 5 guys fell out. I pressed the gas to get away from them. Then I slowed down to let the truck catch up. They caught up with us at the next turn. I turned the wheel quickly, almost tipping our little car. The big truck couldn't make the turn. No matter how hard the driver tried, it ended up flipping over. "I'm sorry," I said. "I know you want to keep me safe," she replied, smiling again. "You might as well say it." "Say what?" I asked. "That you want to protect me because you care about me," she said. "Get down!" I shouted as another officer jumped into the road. I heard bullets hitting and saw the glass crack from a few shots that came into our car. "I guess I'll have to be the next Captain America," she joked. "My shield is still holding up." "Yeah, it is," I replied. "Lucky for us, I didn't get hit this time either." "What do you mean this time?" she asked quickly. "Did you get hit again? Rick, why didn't you tell me?" "You're so silly! Where did they hit you?" she yelled. "I got hit in the shoulder, but it's not too bad," I said. "I can still hold the wheel with my left hand and steer with my right. The one on my ankle hurts more. I don't think I can walk on it. It feels broken. I'll carry you," she said. "We can do this together." "But there are 2 more trucks next to us," I explained. "One is a block to the north, and the other is just ahead to the south. If I were them, I would move 1 truck behind us and trap us where they want us." "I think that's what they'll try to do. What do we do now?" she asked. For the first time, she looked really scared. Normally, I would handle everything. I said this to sound brave. I've made it through tougher times before. I was not telling the whole truth. "Can't you do it now?" she asked. "I really can't while I'm trying to keep you safe," I told her. "Am I slowing you down?" she wanted to know, and I just nodded. "But if you have courage, we can make it," I said. "What do I need to do?" she asked. "The Russian border is just 1 block away. If you look through the houses, you'll see a small guard hut by the bridge. That place is safe. But there are also a couple of trucks with armed people nearby, and there's another truck in front of us, plus one they could bring up behind us." "Okay," she said. "What do you want me to do?" I said, "Millie, I'm going to turn quickly and switch off our lights. It will become very dark. Do you see that small shed we just passed?" "Yes," she replied. "When I turn, I'll slow down a bit. I want you to hide in the bushes near it, but don't go inside the shed. Just find a place in the bushes or one of the yards behind it. I will drive away fast and those trucks will follow me. Once I'm gone, I can go quicker and deal with them one by one. I won't have to worry about you if they are all following me. You need to get to the border and tell them who you are. The Russians are nice to us now. If you explain your story, they'll keep you safe. You also need to find a phone and call someone for help. Not just for me, but for everyone still at the palace. Can you do that?" "Yes, but I want to stay with you." She hesitated. "Rick," I said firmly, "you keep talking about how we feel for each other, but why would I want to be with someone I can't trust when things get hard? If I have to look after you, I won't make it." "Okay, Rick," she replied softly. "Millie, everything will be fine." I smiled. "One day we'll laugh about this, right?" she said. "We'll name our first child, girl or boy." I quickly turned the steering wheel and the tires made a loud noise. I could hear the nearby trucks slamming their brakes. The streets were narrow, so I could see the truck lights and the men in the back trying to hold on. Millie opened the door a little and rolled out into the dark. Once she was safe, I turned on the Mustang's headlights. They showed where I was, but Millie, behind me, was still hidden. I sped up and shot a couple of rounds into the air to get their attention. They seemed ready for it, more than I thought they would be. A truck that had been close to me from the south turned the corner and came after me, so I quickly turned left and drove away from Millie. I drove fast, but not so fast that the trucks lost me for about 5 minutes. We were back in that same game of chase with all the noise I was making and the sharp turns I took. I knew they were trying hard to catch me. I chuckled to myself as I remembered all the stories I had shared with Millie. She was 4 years younger than me, but she felt even younger. How did she expect me to get out of this with only 11 bullets left? I had just 1 bullet ready in the gun, and I wasn't sure I could change the bullet holder while driving with just 1 hand that worked well. She still had the old revolver we got from Piotr. I was losing a lot of blood from the 3 bullets inside me, and I was having a hard time staying awake. I wasn't like James Bond. I didn't have cool tools to help me. I had just told her a lie. My real plan was to make a lot of noise and keep them busy so she could run away before they got to me. If I got lucky and they didn't see me, I would still bleed to death while their traps closed in fast. I didn't think I would make it close enough to the border to be safe. The 2 trucks that had been following us were already there to stop us from getting near the Russian border. We got as close as we could when I let Millie out. The only good thing was that the trucks changed direction when we got near the border. Even if they let me try again, there was no one left to distract them. I felt hopeless, but I might as well try to take a few of them down with me. I wanted to damage another truck so I could grab more weapons and supplies. It was too late to think about anything else. Then I saw a truck coming toward me about 50 yards away. If it turned onto my street, I would be trapped. Being trapped meant I could be in big trouble, and I hadn't prepared enough. I felt nervous as I watched the truck drive away. I started to think about Rick's plan. For the first time since this started, I felt really scared. I couldn't tell if I was scared of dying or if it was because Rick had left me alone again. I crouched down low and stayed in the shadows like Rick told me to. After a while, the truck Rick told me about finally showed up. It came from the south and turned onto our street. Rick didn't expect it, but I was hiding. I wished I had hidden in the shed. It would have kept me warmer. The truck went past the shed where Rick was, but then it stopped further down the street. Suddenly, I heard gunshots hitting the shed. 2 men jumped out and ran towards it. One of them saw the shed was locked and shot the lock off. He looked inside, then slammed the door shut and ran back to the truck, which took off fast after Rick. I was all alone again. It was just me and the dark night. I smiled as I watched the lights from the bridge and the border. It made me think of Rick's silly poem. There was a line saying the night had nothing to fear because he was watching over me, and that made me happy. I walked a little bit. What bothered me the most was that Rick only found his courage at the very end. That felt like something a man would do. He never really told me how he felt the whole time. The only time he was honest was when he was about to kick me out of the car. But we still had more to talk about. I could hear car tires in the distance, and many people were looking out their windows, but no one came to help me. I walked toward the bridge thinking that everything was going the way Rick wanted. Then I heard gunshots. Someone was firing a lot. I thought, do what you have to do. Get rid of them. But then I remembered that Rick only had 1 gun. He had just a few bullets left when he got hurt. He had already used 2 of them to fight back. Rick had 11 bullets, and his gun wasn't fast. He had a bullet in his shoulder and was only using 1 hand to drive. He couldn't shoot while driving. The sound of the shooting moved away from me. Suddenly, the sky lit up like it was a big holiday, and I heard a loud boom. I was walking up the ramp to the bridge. The soldiers on the Russian side smiled at me, but I felt a chill of fear. I was safe, but I was still scared. I noticed a man on the side looking at me while holding up his phone. He pointed at me, but it was too late. The Russian soldiers took me to their small building. I tried to relax. "Miss Cameron, you are safe now," one of them said in a thick accent as he sat me down in a chair. Just then, a long car pulled up. 3 men in suits got out and rushed to the building. "Miss Cameron, I'm Ambassador Ward," one of them said. "I got the Russians to help us. They've been great. Get the soldiers to assist. He's still out there," I shouted. "Miss Cameron, you need to calm down," he replied. "I know this is very stressful." But just then, a loud noise shook the building like an earthquake. I ignored it and turned to the man in front of me. "You don't understand," I said firmly. "I don't need calm words right now. I need soldiers with big guns to handle those guys. That's where I come in," said a man dressed in all black. "I'm here to help. Just tell me where to go. Let's go." I replied, "No, ma'am," he said. "You need to stay here, but tell me where to send people." "Just follow the screams and gunshots," I said. "But I'm going with you, Captain," I insisted. "You can't just go in there shooting," said the ambassador. "We need to talk and think." "Watch me," said the captain. He turned and walked out the door. I tried to keep up with him, but he walked quickly. When I stepped outside, I saw 3 black helicopters take off into the sky. "Rick!" As the truck sped towards me, I paused for a moment. It felt like a game. Then, out of nowhere, a bullet hit the glass in front of me, shaking the seat beside me. Thankfully, I wasn't hurt. More shots came through the window. I turned the wheel to the right and drove up onto the sidewalk, crashing into a fence. I thought I had damaged the bottom of my Mustang, but the car kept running well. There was a truck behind me, and I thought I was safe. But then, another truck showed up out of nowhere, and I had to turn the wheel the other way. Suddenly, bullets flew into the car. My bad luck hit when one struck my right upper chest. It felt like being hit with a hot baseball bat, and it got hard to breathe. I wanted to fight back, but my left arm was almost useless, and I needed my right arm to steer. I was relieved the car was automatic since my left leg stopped hurting, and I couldn't even feel it anymore. I felt weak from losing so much blood. My chest burned from the wound, while the rest of my body felt cold and tingly. If everything was fine, Millie should have reached the Russians by now. I wasn't sure I could keep going, but I had to try to give her a chance. I felt like a fool, as if I only had a few seconds left. I took my right hand off the wheel and used my weak left hand to keep the car straight. I picked up my iPhone and started the voice recorder. "Millie, if you hear this, I'm probably gone. I want you to know that it was a privilege to serve you and your family, and I don't regret anything. I'm sorry I was tough on you at the end, but I had to make sure you were safe. I understand how you felt about me, and I felt the same way about you, but that doesn't matter anymore. If I meant anything to you, please do one last thing for me. I have a daughter named Katrina. Please take care of her and tell her dad loved her. I believe people can change, but if anyone can't, it's likely my ex-wife. My biggest fear is that Katrina will grow up to be like her." Then, an explosion shook everything around me. I realized they were using something more powerful than bullets. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw a man in a truck with a rocket launcher. He seemed to be getting it ready again. I quickly turned the corner, drove a little farther, and then turned again in the opposite direction. I turned off the car and the lights, sitting quietly in the dark, wishing the trucks would just drive past me. The first truck went by without stopping. The second truck slowed down, and the men inside started pointing at me. I quickly turned the car back on and drove away fast. I went over a yard and hit a fence. I squeezed my Mustang between 2 houses, knocking down another fence as I went. I finally ended up in an alley behind a garage and barely missed hitting it. But my Mustang had a big dent on the back. I got back on the street and raced down the road. I thought I might find a place to leave the car and look for a house to hide in. Maybe I could find someone who could help me with my injury. Then I started laughing. Nothing had gone as I wanted, so why would it change now? It always feels the darkest right before it gets even darker. The street I turned onto was blocked by something. It looked like it shouldn't be a dead end. None of the streets around here looked safe. I turned around, wanting to go back, and saw 3 trucks that had been following me. Men were jumping out of them. Suddenly, bright lights shone in front of me. What I thought was a dead end was actually the biggest armored vehicle I had ever seen. I saw Agent May inside the vehicle, and Prince Gregor was there too. Agent May said, "Agent Hammond, you can't escape. Prince Gregor and I are here to help you. There's been a mistake. Get out of the car and put your gun down. I promise you won't be harmed." There were at least 20 soldiers behind me and just as many in front. The big armored vehicle was too strong for my Mustang to push aside. The trucks behind me were blocking my way. I would have to get through a hail of bullets to get away. I thought, this might be the end. I opened the car door slowly, still holding my gun in my good hand, and looked at them. "No way," I said. I shouted, "What do you mean?" He asked, "I'm your boss. Put that gun down and come with us. Prince Gregor is the new king of Pacmans. Stand up. It is Prince Gregor who is behind this." I answered, "He did all this because he wants Millie." Gregor smiled and said, "So you know, that makes things easier. It also means I don't need you anymore." In an instant, he shot Agent May in the head. I barely reacted before I fired my gun at Gregor's stomach. That wound hurt a lot, but it might not kill him. I cursed my injuries as I fell. Normally, I was a good shot, even from far away, but because I was tired and losing blood, I could only blame myself. Gregor yelled, "Kill him now!" I knew it was the end. The men behind me started to move in, shooting as they came. I couldn't get up to run. With my hurt ankle, I was too slow to escape. Soon, the men in the big armored vehicle came toward me. They were getting closer when suddenly they all screamed at once and ran the other way. A loud noise, like a bunch of gunshots, hit the vehicle as they ran. Then a missile came down from the sky and blew up the armored vehicle. It hit so hard that it lifted the vehicle off the ground for a moment. I thought I heard something in the air, but I was not fully aware, so I thought I was just imagining it. At least they would go down with me, I thought. I didn't understand why the men behind me turned against their own leader and army, but I was not unhappy about it. Then I saw the men behind me start to run away. Two of the 3 trucks were already wrecked, and the men in the last truck had left it and were running away. Bright lights filled the area, and I noticed what everyone else saw. 3 black Apache helicopters hovered right above me. One pointed forward, another watched the men behind me, and the last one landed just a few feet away. Not good, sir. I heard someone say, "He's got at least 5 bullet wounds. I can't believe he's still alive." I replied, "I only remember 3. I asked, "Is Millie the president's daughter?" He answered quickly, "She's fine. We need to help you." I said, "Don't bother. I'm not going to make it, Millie." When the helicopters landed on the roof of the Russian hospital, I felt a bit of relief at first. But then I saw Rick, and I felt overwhelmed. The helicopters took off again right away to go to the palace. It took less than 15 minutes to defeat the whole army led by Pacman Stand. 2 Secret Service agents, besides Agent May, lost their lives. Liz was hurt, but she was okay. The 2 women agents, Patty and Gail, were also hurt along with an English woman named Beth. Carmela's situation was different. While the others had to fight to protect themselves, she had given up. The next thing she knew, they were trying to hurt her. They had to keep sending in more men. Who knows what might have happened if she hadn't been saved? Pacman didn't have many soldiers left. The doctors in the Russian hospital were trying to fix Rick's injuries, but he fell into a deep sleep. They got him ready for the flight home, where they could take out the bullets and take care of him. They called for a military jet to bring him back, and I stayed with him even though they didn't want me to. They had to leave one of the medical helpers behind on the plane to make room for me. I guess she was lucky because she got to fly home more comfortably instead of on a military plane. I found a chair after a while. Once the plane took off, I sat next to Rick's bed. I held his hand and told him that everything would be okay. During the flight, my dad called me. "Millie, why aren't you on the plane?" he asked. "I'm tired of hearing about you running around like this. I know you've been through a lot, but you need to act like an adult. You can't be alone out there." "You don't even have your Secret Service team with you, Dad," I said. "I'm an adult, and my Secret Service guy is right here with me. I'll talk to you when I land," he replied. I was sitting in my living room with Donnie, and it was really dull. I noticed that he often walked around the house alone. Not that I minded. I didn't have anything he could take, and I made sure he didn't go into Katrina's room, whether she was there or not. Sometimes Donnie gave me a little money, which was helpful when I needed to use the cash Rick sent for Katrina. As I thought about it, I realized that besides money and some fun, Donnie didn't really offer me much. The fun didn't matter much either, because Rick didn't care about who I was hanging out with anymore. If it didn't upset him, what was the point? I turned on the TV and Donnie looked at me. "Why are you turning that on?" he asked. "Aren't I interesting enough for you?" "Who is Marinelli and why should I care?" I asked. "Forget it. You're just too much," he began, but I tuned him out as I flipped through the channels. I saw a news report about Agent Richard Hammond, who was badly hurt. When I looked up, I saw Rick's face on the screen. "Oh my God!" I screamed. "Ha ha ha!" Donnie laughed. "That guy got what he deserved. I hope he never comes back," I shot back. Donnie looked shocked. "I'm sorry, baby," he said. "I didn't mean it. I was just joking." I told him, "Get out now, or I'll call the police. Come on, Donnie, with that hurt foot you can barely walk, so stop trying to act brave. Just go." He limped to the door and stepped outside right away. I picked up my phone and called back. This time I was loud and upset. I cried, yelled, and said bad words until they put me through to another woman. "Yes?" she said in a calm voice, sounding a bit annoyed. "I'm trying to find out about my husband, and I was sent to—" "Oh, you're that person," she replied. "It's good you called. I can check you off my list. Do you want to come here or should I come to you?" What are you talking about? I asked. I just want to know how Rick is. Okay, I'll come to you, she said. He's having another operation tomorrow morning. This one is important, but it's not life-threatening. They need to put a pin in his leg. The doctors say that after some physical therapy, he should be able to walk and even run again. I'll be at your house by 10. Just make sure to have a pen ready. You might need to sign some papers while I'm there. Who do you think you are? I asked angrily, but all I got was a dial tone. I was really mad. I thought it was some kind of trick to keep me away from my husband. I wasn't going to let that happen. My mind was racing. If he was having another operation, it must mean he had surgeries before. That meant Rick had been badly hurt at work. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop thinking that this might be my chance to save my marriage if I helped Rick while he healed. Maybe he could forgive me. Strange things can happen. I imagined the woman in charge would be strict and serious, like a worker from the government who only wanted me to stay out of sight. If people saw Rick as a hero, they likely wouldn't want his old wife looking bad on TV. They probably didn't want someone like me who looked rough representing him. That was their problem, not mine. I started looking through my clothes to find something nice to wear. I wished I could buy something new and stylish. I spent the day watching the news, hoping to learn more about what happened to Rick and how he was doing. It frustrated me that as his legal wife, I couldn't find out more than anyone else. I felt even worse because Donnie kept calling me. I pretended to be angry with him, but really, I just needed some time to think on my own. If I wanted to get my husband back, I had to get Donnie out of my life. He was married, and he wouldn't leave his wife. He had made it clear that I was not important to him. I was just a temporary thing. My time with him was uncertain. Deep inside, I still loved Rick. Sure, he had upset me, and I had tried to make him feel bad too. But in the end, he was the only one I truly cared about, along with my daughter. I realized that having her dad around would be best for Katrina. I had worked hard not to be like my mother. But look at where I ended up. One bad choice had ruined many good things I had tried to build. After making that mistake, I kept making more. Now, I finally had a chance to change things. Maybe I could make things right again. The news was full of stories about Rick. He had stopped an entire army and saved 10 or 12 people, including the president's daughter. Suddenly, everything clicked for me. I thought about money and fame. I thought about bringing my family back together. Even if I couldn't win Rick back, I could still be rich and famous on my own. I could write a book that shares everything. Actually, I could write a whole set of books. The first one would tell how I met Rick and helped him become a college football star. The second book would be about our life as a couple. It would talk about how I got pregnant and how hard it was for me to lose the weight after having his daughter. Looking back, Rick really affected my modeling job when I became pregnant. The third book would explain what it was like to be married to a Secret Service agent. I would talk about how the stress from his job, long hours, and not knowing where he was led to our marriage ending. If we got back together, I could even write a fourth book about that. Even if my books didn't sell well, Rick was still going to be famous. I could make sure he paid more child support and maybe even more to me for the divorce. No matter what happened, I was determined. Rick was in a tough spot, but I believed it would work out well for me. I picked up Katrina from daycare. I decided to keep things quiet for now. I didn't want her to worry. The next morning, I took her to school like I always do and went home around 9 o'clock. A bunch of black cars pulled up. They all had the Secret Service logo on them. A group of men dressed like Rick did for work came out and started searching the yard. I let them into the house, and they looked through each room carefully. I figured they were my bodyguards, making sure I was safe while I waited for Rick. Rick often said he didn't always think highly of the people he protected, but he did his job well. I noticed some of them giving me glances. They could think whatever they wanted. I was a celebrity now. While they checked the house, a few of them talked into walkie-talkies and stared at me. I wondered why they didn't just use cell phones like everyone else. It was almost 10 o'clock. A long black limousine stopped in front of my house. I knew Miss Titus had come right on time. I opened the door and was surprised. Miss Titus looked younger and prettier than I expected. Her face seemed familiar, but I couldn't remember where I had seen her before. She was often in the news. The biggest shock was that she was holding my daughter's hand. She walked past me and told Katrina to go upstairs and pick out some clothes. She wanted to take her on a trip to see her dad. When she spoke, everything became clear. She had a soft Texas accent, long blonde hair, and very blue eyes. She was Millicent Cameron. She was the one the Secret Service was trying to protect, not me. I wondered if I should pack too. I asked, "How long will we be gone? Where are we going?" At first, I thought she didn't hear me. Her face changed a lot, like she was trying hard to stay calm. She looked at one of her Secret Service men and pointed to the couch. He opened the newspaper he was holding and placed it on my sofa. She sat down on the newspaper and looked at me. "You don't need to pack," she said kindly, but her tone had changed. Now it sounded sharp, like each word could cut. She was cold, yet polite. "You're either staying here or going with us." The way she spoke made me feel uneasy. This woman was in her early 20s, younger than me, but she reminded me of her father. When I saw him on TV, he seemed friendly and charming, but when he talked to Congress or discussed war, that charm disappeared and he became all serious. He was not a good man. She clearly took after him. "Can you just say something that makes sense?" I asked. "What do you mean? You said I'm either staying here or leaving. You asked if you needed to pack." She replied, "If you stay here, you don't need to pack. If you go away, you also won't need to pack for that trip." I was confused. "What are you talking about?" I whispered in anger. "I'm taking Katrina to see her dad," she said. "Where's the pen I told you to have ready? There's something wrong with you." I replied, "You can't take my daughter anywhere without my okay." "Actually, I can," she answered. I raised my voice. "Just because you're the president's daughter doesn't mean you can do whatever you want." She held up her hand to stop me. "It's not just me," she said. "But I did make things move faster. This is all your fault. Rick filed for custody of Katrina before he went to his last job. He even sent them this video." She pulled out a phone I recognized as Rick's. She pressed a button, and the video began to play. "They were probably going to have a custody hearing anyway," she said. "It just would have taken longer, and who knows how it might have ended. You're not the best influence for her. Rick has a job that might take him out of the country suddenly. If things had been different, they would probably have told you to do better and brought her back to you." I smiled at that idea, but everything has changed now. She said, "Rick is getting a better job soon. It's a safer job and he won't have to travel." "That's great," I replied. "That's what I've always wanted." She looked at me as if I was out of place. "They decided that Rick will take care of Katrina," she said with a sly grin. "So I'm bringing her to him." "What about me?" I asked. "You can't send a little girl to a new city by herself. She doesn't know anyone there." "What about you?" she asked. "It seems like everything is about you." "But I do have something for you," she said, reaching into her pocket. She took out some folded papers and placed them on the sofa between us. "You have 4 years to sort out your life," she mentioned. "The support ends after that." I looked down and saw that the papers were for a divorce. They stated that we had issues we couldn't fix. I would get $35,000 every year for 4 years, and I could spend a lot of time with my daughter. We would even share holidays together. But that was all there was. "You must be joking," I said. "This is worse than what Rick's lawyers offered. His plan gave me custody of Katrina and the same money for 5 years. It would be silly for me to agree to this." "You're not looking at the whole story," she said with a smile. "Look at the card." I noticed a small orange card stapled to the first page. It was a get-out-of-jail-free card from a Monopoly game. I didn't understand why the card was important. She just smiled and said, "You'll get it later." Then she checked her watch. "Danielle, excuse me for a moment," she said. She took out her phone and made a call. She spoke calmly, but her smile showed she was excited about something. She looked at me and tilted her head, as if she was thinking about telling me something. "The surgery went really well," she said. "He will need to wear a cast for about 6 weeks, but with some therapy he should be okay. They put in a special pin, so he can walk through metal detectors without any trouble." She got up and went upstairs. A few minutes later, she came back down with my daughter. "Mommy, I'm going to ride a plane and visit Daddy. I miss him." I hugged her tightly and looked at Millicent, who gave me a warm smile. "Danielle, I need to stop by Katrina's school to get her records moved. When I was there before, they were just starting to get ready. It felt like it was taking forever. I asked them to have everything ready in an hour so I could come back and pick it up. You can see Katrina anytime. I can help you book a flight when you want to go. If you can't go for some reason, you can still call her every day." Danielle. The woman kept saying my name as if she wanted to make sure I was paying attention. My offer, including the card, is good for 12 hours. Agent Williams will be here until 11 tonight. If he doesn't have the signed papers by then, we'll have a big problem. She smiled again as she and my daughter walked to the door. I felt angry watching them get into the limo. This was not how I wanted things to happen. The woman thought I should leave Rick for $35,000 a year. I could live on that amount. It might even be better than my life now. But $35,000 was not a lot compared to what Rick would make. I sat on the couch, fuming. Not long after they left, my front door burst open and crashed into my living room. A group of men wearing gas masks and bulletproof vests with the letters DEA on them rushed in. 2 of them handcuffed me with plastic ties and pushed me to the floor, while the others searched my house in just 4 minutes. They came out of the bathroom and kitchen with big plastic bags full of white powder. "Look what we found here, ma'am," one agent said with a smile. "I'm sure you don't know anything about this, right?" "Of course I don't," I said. "I have my problems, but I don't do drugs. Lady, you have enough here to get half the city high." He laughed. They took me outside, and that's when I saw something that shocked me. Donnie was there, also in handcuffs. He wouldn't look at me as I walked by him towards the police car. When he finally turned to face me, he smiled in a mean way. "Why, Donnie?" I shouted. "Let me guess." He smirked. "You thought I came here for you?" He chuckled a bit. "Don't kid yourself. You're not as special as you think. I can get what I want anywhere. Just a tip. Be careful in there." An hour later, I was in a small room talking to my lawyer. I told him I was innocent and had been used. He told me that Donnie made a deal to get a shorter sentence. He had given names, including mine. He mentioned someone named Marinelli, who he said was keeping the drugs. Donnie also told them about me. Marinelli and his group were facing serious time for making and selling drugs. I was in trouble for having a lot of illegal drugs. The punishment for this was much worse than if I only had enough for myself. Donnie wouldn't get much time in jail because he was only caught moving the drugs. He would do his time and then have to speak at the trial. After that, he would go into a safe program and start a new life. The government would probably help him start a business so he could live how he wanted, instead of waiting a long time for his dad to pass away. "Danielle, you could get at least 20 years, he said. "No way," I replied. "I have a way out." Millicent. I liked her right away. She was a bright, calm little girl. In some ways, she reminded me of myself when I was young. But she was better. She wasn't spoiled and had good manners. She must have learned that from her dad. As I sat next to the bed holding Rick's hand, I had to be very careful. Rick had gunshot wounds in both arms. He needed surgery on his left arm to fix a muscle. I was careful with his arm. Moving it too much could hurt him and make it harder for him to get better. Then I heard the door open behind me. I knew his walk. "Hello, Daddy," I said. "What did you do?" he asked. "I put many drug dealers in jail and got drugs off the streets," I replied. "I also helped some DEA agents catch a lot of bad guys. It's good for everyone," I added. "And you did all that just to be nice?" he asked. "Nope," I said. "I did it for Rick. I helped him get his divorce done faster. He would have gotten it eventually, but do you know why divorces take so long?" "No idea, and I don't really care," I answered. But I knew he would tell me anyway. "It's so both people can think carefully about their choice. Almost 30% of the time, they choose to stay together. Sometimes, even after the divorce is finished, they get married again," he said. "Did you know your mother and I almost divorced?" "Yep," I said. "I was 11. I knew it wouldn't happen. You loved each other too much. You didn't belong with anyone else. There were no other people involved. You just needed to stay home longer, but this is different, Dad. She is stalling just to keep him close for his money. She might not even let him have the divorce. If he has been waiting 3 years for it, why does he want it so badly now?" he asked me. I said, "Because I can't stand being away from him another day, Dad." He smiled and played with my hair. I knew he got what I meant. It was just like what he told my mom's dad when he wanted to marry her. He paused at the door. "Your friend Paulie asked some helpers to fix her country's government. It seems she wasn't ready to become a queen. She wants you to call her too. I think she'll want you back to help her get ready for her big party when she becomes queen." "I'll call her, but I might not go," I said. "I'm not really into big parties anymore. I want to stay here until Rick is ready." Plus, I need to spend time with my mom. I'm not ready to be a stepmom yet, so I need her help to understand some things. You'll do great, he said with a smile. Just then, my phone rang. Yes, Danielle? I answered. Do you still have time? She asked. A few hours, actually. The papers are signed and Agent Williams has them. I'm back home now. Your DEA agents broke my walls when they searched my house. Who will fix them? And when will I get my first check? Is it every week or every month? Can I still write a book about my life with Rick? I hung up, surprised when the fingers I held gently suddenly squeezed my hand. His eyes blinked and then opened slowly. I told you to go to the bridge, he said. Where are we? Rick got better from his injuries. It took a long time, but Rena and I were there for him the whole way. Since Rick was a national hero, things went differently than I thought. He started earning a lot of money from speaking events, and we would be set for life once his divorce was over. I asked him to marry me. Danielle came to see Katrina a few times, but she felt uncomfortable, so she stopped coming. Last I heard, she met a guy she liked and left with him. I asked around, and I think Rick did too. No one saw her after she got into a car with a guy who wasn't the one she was living with. Rick didn't stay in public speaking long because his dad and the party wanted him to run for the Senate in an important state. His campaign went well, and people expect great things from him in the future. We realize how much we care for each other. We do argue sometimes, but it's mostly about our different backgrounds. We both have some old habits we need to change, but they aren't serious. He still likes to watch over me while I sleep, but now he does it from right next to me in bed. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.